Yeah.
I talked to Jill and Antonio, and the PDF I sent you can be sent out if you want for the most recent one.
But maybe that.
Either way, we'll put it up when we're up on the screen when we're discussing the motion.
Okay.
It's just grammatical changes.
Okay.
So there's still membership. Yeah. Because no, I mean, like you swap seats with Jennifer and should have known. Jennifer and I were talking about.
Anybody sent their regrets?
So.
One person did, but I'm gonna move Jennifer. Oh, Jennifer decided to you. I didn't know.
I know,
right? Like my first undergrad, I was part of the Golden Key. The Honors, International Honor Society. I did that for my third year. And then when I started doing, like, I started getting more involved with my department. My upper years, but definitely not in like my first 2 years. I'm very prepared for everything. I did a lot of my second because because I'm
like him and Brad
alright, I'm just gonna.
No, they went
I am
to the
currently president of the committee, but I am
right all the way. My only duty is sleeping.
You're an engineer. You know how stuff kind of
I
does.
didn't notice when he left. I just wanted to kiss me in the mouth. And then I actually had planned to move you with my friend Corey. Which looks fun because you're so like really good. It's really like
yeah, they're very rough.
No, but I cried because I related to like it's about a coming out story. I do. I wear the woman. So and then after that, I just
Sorry, I don't think it's
No, I know. Me too. Like, yeah, like
It's true.
So I'm gonna jump on that semester tomorrow. But it's gonna be fine. I just want to double check.
So we take advantage of how to find your way.
There's a lot of options.
You know, you're young.
I don't always choose the easiest route, it's like walking around the table,
Yeah.
but it's effective.
Sure.
Yeah, it's simple.
No, wait, you have Jen's name tag is like
It's too late to really think back.
right there. You can point, but
Where's mine?
We can be that.
Why did mine go?
I don't know. And then Nick is the way
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 Perfect. Hello.
Hi.
Good, how are you? Good. So I'm in the back then?
Yes.
The full color, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
No.
Isn't that amazing?
Okay.
Yep.
You flipped the name tag, so I flipped things to match them.
Oh,
I didn't know if you intended that or not, so I put it into that form. Okay. It was this way.
that was really good.
Yeah, so I was asking you to.
Great story.
Or you want to flip them?
So we got Jennifer's name.
I had
You feel
one-
infuriated.
Oh, yeah. And there's like how fun like our copies were the way the game also have pretty short stories. Cool, but yeah, that makes sense. Sorry for
No, I was very confused.
I thought it was I tried to like subject.
Which one? Like it was not like I just emailed just he just got next email. Oh no, not what I emailed. And then
I'm like,
oh, they did this
I'm
time.
both
We
excited
did
and
that.
scared.
If you want to sit here, just one more down, you can. This is
So real time community.
this has been a real mission, so
Is there a specific order?
there's no specific order.
Then why was the music?
I'm just
Nikta wanted to talk to me about something. In a meeting, I guess, I don't know.
you have made an excellent
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And if somebody does come back with
Sort of like
that,
that.
it just proves what we're talking about. Are you doing this because you care about it?
Easter eggs. Easter eggs. Neighborhood.
She said wants to figure out what we're doing if you're interested at all. And remembering that you.
This isn't, unless it's only for the terms.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Like date, like when we get to kind of get along.
Yeah.
Also, when you do the
Farmers market, that's what I do.
Gym. You go to gym?
Sometimes, I go to yoga sometimes.
you can add the procedure, you can try this procedure, but not also, we need to specify this one.
I know, and that's too bad, because I'm really thinking like, oh, no, and then I don't.
The,
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
That's one of the
That's too
problems.
bad.
It is too bad, but I mean, you know, we're all very different people, we're all very different humans. And having lots of things on the
Tristan said
You
he's
can
just
try to
running
get
a
that
few
one.
minutes.
I don't think that's going to fly very far.
So,
No one's allowed my mistake yet.
and this seems to always take a while too. So, especially with our students, like, almost
That's
like, completely like high difference. So when she comes to at their lunchtime, it's midnight.
Yeah.
So,
So the same as like.
I know it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard.
I'm just saying.
This is the current policy, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I did, but I went on my health services. Here's some good ones.
But again, I'm just gonna have like a dog game like using so
The speaker. I mean, it's the relevant government topics.
But.
Yeah.
We can amend that.
of course not. Right? No one's here on the weekend. So ask Antonio if he knows the answer to this question. Do you have to pay for parking on the weekend on university property?
No, that's fine. We could certainly set up. That's something we can talk about.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of-
Good man.
Date. Well, because I was saying I've worked over in health services, and usually, like, you have, you know, the ones that say, like,
Yeah.
you have to pay at the machine. So I do have an Xbox pass, I was wondering if I could.
We can do that too. That's easy.
It's a nice little stroll too.
I know, well, I'm like, I just don't feel like walking. I was saying, I've been up since 5:30 because my son has to be on the ice at 6 today, so I'm like.
We just made
man.
that concept.
I know.
That's cool. Why
This
does
is
the
university.
university at 6 a.m.?
Well, I think this weekend, it was 6 a.m. and it's championship tournament.
Yeah.
So they have so many meetings that they have to go through that I don't know why
Something
they
about that.
not didn't look there.
That's something good for the kids.
Well, that's the thing, so I had to get out of bed at 5:30.
Yeah.
It's a little bit off, and then it's gonna be, it's just in the morning.
If anything, he'll knock
This
out.
is university.
I don't know, I don't know.
You'll be able to take a nap too.
Energizer buddy guy that just.
Yeah, we're gonna take a nap at the worst time and be wide awake for
Oh.
bedtime.
If you send me the list of the
I mean,
changes
not
you
that
want,
was,
I
that
can
was
help.
most
I can help with that.
well, it's fine.
Yeah.
As kids always do.
As kids always want you to do, absolutely.
That's so
Hello.
funny.
Are we expecting VP Bluebond to be here today?
No.
This one?
Yeah, that was.
He has co-op interviews. It's not co-op interviews, he has the proposed co-op interviews.
And you
Bring us up to
do,
scale.
are they going to see him tomorrow?
We'll see him tomorrow.
Is it because of his keys?
Play
Yeah.
champagne.
We can give him.
I do.
So those we can also close his
I'm
office.
also gonna sell them on eBay. Like, Matt still has them.
Like, when it's over, I could always drop
You
it.
just, you just stir the pot.
It's very dense.
Hey, Joe, I drafted
I'm sure, well, yeah, that's like probably, that's
Sorry, just make sure it
Yeah.
sounded like you're
No, no,
talking about, and then I was like,
So I trailed off because I realized I thought I was interrupting you guys. Okay, sweet. I drafted a
Just don't mind me.
how to improve
Oh, and I'm not really, I just usually.
from what we talked about on where, like with the incoming exec, that on like a kind of like a brainstorming doc to hand the incoming exec. I was gonna shoot it your way. I have a couple more things on it. I thought though, that before I go ahead and do that, is I thought it would be worthwhile setting Slack to review a service a year and just have a calendar where it's like service A, service B, service C, and go A.
yeah, because he's gonna go all
In 1 year, you review service A,
And then I'll-
and all the other services write like interim reports that you review and then you provide recommendations to Slack on, but that Slack sole focus for a year is to review a single service in depth, as opposed to all the services
at
at a little bit.
a little level.
Also would add the services manager as a non-member to Slack, and make Slack have, because we're reviewing a service in depth, have the same
No,
Ready?
no.
roughly the same frequency of meeting and capacity as IAC, but maybe on like every other week as opposed to every week basis. Because I know IAC meets every week. I think.
We are weekly, yeah.
So instead of that, it would be like every other week for an entire year to review a service type of thing. Those are some of the changes I've suggested. Also, it would probably need a year to like figure out. One of the recommendations I was thinking about was looking at like development of metrics and how to evaluate, and like what the evaluative process will look like, how they should evaluate it. So that would be like, I would like to flesh that out this year with Black if we can. As a like, this is how we take it forward.
Yeah.
Needles Hall 3318. Do you know
Because I think that
where the
would
Senate
help a
chambers
lot.
are?
It would also
The
mean,
new one.
lighten the load in terms of you
Yeah.
having to do stuff with
Yeah,
Black
the third
and
floor.
stuff like that. Also, generally,
It's the boardroom closest to the, you
I
know,
think
the
it's
bridge
worth.
between the
We used
science
to have
building
all the committees were chaired by
and
counselors.
and Needles. Yeah, it's
The committee barely-
boardroom right there.
So basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it'd be worth.
Okay.
No, there's not that
But
good.
you can fight
Because for some committees where it makes a lot of sense, for some committees it doesn't, especially like oversight committees, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, it's, yeah, it's hard to, I think it's, I don't know, it's a little ironic, for the chair to
Be the person who's over.
That's an advisory committee, right? Like,
It's a poor name for the committee too, because its only advisory role is identifying new service needs. It's all other roles are strictly administrative, like reviewing, evaluating, and need for deletion of existing services, and creation of new services. That's like 100%.
So that's why
And so it's a really disingenuous name for an advisory committee. I think it should probably be something called.
So we had the university.
Internal services committee or something like, or
At fall.
services review committee or something like that.
Yeah.
also, like, it's ironic that's why campus life when it's only doing services,
Academic
typically.
Well, so it also technically oversees commissions. Commissions are also, we have
And it
commissions.
started sort
But
of.
it used to be the case that they had a lot more.
And
It
it
used
took
to
me
be
to
more
the entire.
So then there's.
term reports.
Yeah, so it started, it was on a Monday.
I got a bunch of back history on this, but we got it in February 2012.
Yeah, so it was,
Then we moved away,
it
we
was
said,
really
you know,
good, I attended
exact
it,
full
and there was,
value,
4 hours of
Something on
right? I talked
And
to
then we moved to a
Ann,
1 year
and I
report.
talked to Sandra, who's the vice
Like an end
president
of year
of
reporting.
marketing, like,
And now we've more or less
I
given up on doing
second
anything
level,
with
and
commissions.
they were
I
like,
think it's
okay,
kind of
let's
like
have a
not
discussion about,
because
as a community,
I'm
what
okay
we
with their
think
commissions being
is the
managed by
definition of
executives.
academic
It's an extension of the
freedom,
executive, the
and
arm of
freedom
the
of
executive.
expression
But
and distinguishing
having
from
zero
both. Because if we don't have a
interaction
common
with
understanding
an
of what
oversight
those
committee is,
terms
I
are,
think, bad. So
how can we really
I think it would be good
have
for
a
services
nuanced
and
conversation
like only for
about
services.
Yeah, so you think the
Because IAC
UW
does it
Senate
clubs
gonna make a
and
move
other-
on that soon?
I
Yeah.
think the administration
Yeah.
is. I don't know
I
if
would
it's
like
gonna
to-
be the Senate, but the
I don't
administration
disagree at
knows
all.
that
Like,
our
actually, I think it's a
chances
good
that
idea
we
to
need to be
revamp it and, like, look
proactive
at
on
it
it, and I've suggested
I'll bit prioritize, like, when
I'll shoot you what I
Chicago
wrote.
principles of freedom of expression as a potential
Oh, yeah, I'll
tool,
shoot
but they're
the
not,
document.
they're not
I'm
convinced that
still
is
working on
the
some stuff on
route,
it.
right?
So it's
They
just
want
an
they
issue
wanna
of
send
them having
something
that discussion
Yeah.
and then
It's
sort of
like
more
how
of a
Josh said.
tool.
sure.
But I wanted your
Yeah.
overall thoughts.
No, I think that's like,
But
for
they're in
like the
agreement.
primary
We have
concept, like, I
to-
think you're right.
So there's
It's like in a way
conversations
that, like,
happening, and
Platt
that's
needs to
sort of the
be.
first result
Okay.
of some of
Well,
the
it's supposed
advocacy
to be something
efforts that
different than-
came from.
And since it's
Like,
likely
what's
the
written on
final
paper is not
decision on
what's
this won't be
meant to
made
And
until
yeah, and that's
sometime
what's
next
not
year. You're gonna
Yeah.
be speaking to
Because,
your
like,
successor, like the next
Yeah,
president.
I'll make sure to talk to him about it. It'll be my, it'll be
Well, and
one
also
of
like
like
think
the
about like
top
when
options.
it was, there was 6 series.
It'll
So it
be
wasn't
my-
more
it'll be
than right?
my,
Like, it's more difficult to see what's in their boards and like suggestions because you're looking at 6.
Yeah, which is why I wanted to.
Yeah, and I'll.
And that's why it's probably, that's why it's like, diluted though, is because
Okay.
it's
Sounds like
well,
it, yeah.
and we've switched from being more strategical to operational.
Pardon? Yeah, it'll be.
Designed as an operational committee, because it's an oversight committee. And there's one of the few oversight committees.
Before we start.
Which is, then again,
There's
like
some
honestly,
society
is
that
because
can you make
should
sure
not
to
be
go down there?
super into item operations, it should be in
So that we can include them in the admin.
It can, but
Under the
it
bylaws, it should be, it's allowed to. So it's allowed to be services. Should be as a different person. I think it's committee. This one.
and then it's actually, that's part of the recommendations, yeah, I agree with that, like.
Committee should be operational in some capacity, in like a month, 2 or a week, 2 weeks, on a regular meeting capacity, as opposed to, like, you bring a list of decisions, these need to get made, like, I will execute them once the decision is made, here's the list, please make a decision.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, IAC is very similar to that. IAC is an administrative committee, it's not a, it's not a strategy committee, and that's for a reason, right? Like, there needs to be some sort of oversight. No, budget committee. Budget committees are very administrative.
Yeah, so I think it's just making sure that that is really
Clearly. And that's why I want to redo also the procedures. Probably legacy of the fact that I asked Sasha about this yesterday. I was like, why are all these procedures so awful? And he was like, well, all of them used to be in the bylaws.
Oh.
Before 2012 rewrite, every single council and board procedure was a bylaw. We had 70 pages of bylaws. He sent me the original bylaws. He sent me the original bylaws. Okay, he also needs some defense. Like,
Jill,
Worded bylaws.
so with the
That bylaws are
services came up, I had a bit of a concern about the process of how that
operation.
I just thought we were just like informed of what the full proposal was this year. So I was wondering what your thoughts on that, on the whole process of that word, because Andrew wanted to know.
like Andrew Klubine?
Yeah, Andrew.
Okay. So how, what do you mean with the process? Do you mean like how we got to it?
Yeah, as in like GM not having a full proposal to vote on, not really knowing what was going to be in it. There was a feeling that this was a little rushed.
Well, I mean, I would say we're like yes and no to being rushed. Like I think we were under such a tight timeline that we had to be rushed to get all the governance like structures. So to speak of that, but I think that the implementation stage is different. And so yes, the process of developing the proposal to get to council probably super rushed because we brought it up in January and had to make sure it was brought to GM and then also brought back to council starting February. But the implementation stage will go a lot slower. So from my mindset, like this service, because we have to, we stated an area that needed more resources, such as like human capacity, right? We need to hire another staff before the service could come on board because our services have doubled since Brennan has come to, or sorry, service manager, I don't need to drop names, since he's come into the role. So that needs to be completely taken care of before the service can be like up and running.
There's also the question of, with this problem, which I think we all agree is the problem, is the service the best way to deal with it, which we haven't really had enough time to talk about and to discuss and look into.
So I think that could be that could be the part of the evaluation stage, and I think that's something that like FAC can take into consideration. But I don't think it's I don't think that's enough to stop from running because this is one of the solutions to put
Because we still could meet that January 2019 deadline with having the final proposal, perhaps looked at again and edited up until say July or something like that.
Well, like, so the motion in front of us today to approve the creation doesn't stop the conversation. This proposal is supposed to be the higher level proposal, right? And then we, the last section was to give a higher level idea on what the implementation plan is going to look like. And then Vice President Charnel, along with like Clark, is going to make sure to report and the sort of to report back to council on the progress of those implementation points.
So
there
will there be another vote after this? Say if the committees take a look and say, hey, maybe the service isn't the best way to address this issue, is there going to be another point or another opportunity?
Well, council has the power to both create and remove services. So there's always
a
that
solution
tool.
for this issue is certainly necessary, but the question is a service the best way to do it? I don't believe we've had quite the consultation process necessary. And it's in very rushed, like the GM, everyone wasn't sure quite what they were voting on. We really only got the full proposal this morning.
No, you got the full proposal. There was edited versions.
Okay.
It was the but it hasn't been changed. There was some feedback that came when we sent it out on Monday.
Okay. I guess I only saw the version on today. But nevertheless, there still is the issue of there being a GM and not really knowing what that dollar
But the GM is only to approve funding towards the service. So keep that in mind. Like they're separate. Like the GM doesn't necessarily need to get the proposal. They just need to understand that what is this which was laid out.
Although for them to fully comprehend what they're voting on would have been good
And that's what
too.
council's for.
So we wanted to respect the powers of the general meeting and council, right? So we were originally like, we're going to do a full-on presentation, but then we're like, we don't want to take away council's purview of essentially reviewing that vision, higher level intention of the service, right? So
And that's the responsibility of this group, right? And so with that in mind, first off, like the implementation stage will be a lot slower. Just to like put that like into your mind, like right now, like we will not feasibly cannot happen until a manager's hired or a secondary resource for services. So that will be starting in the spring term. And one is the proposal states that we're looking to hire coordinators. We're planning for both spring and fall for the creation to happen in winter. Therefore, that is still allows for opportunity of solutions to come forward. But I think we can't sit idly waiting for whatever the best solution is in the competition when there's a problem. And we've come up with one solution. Yes, I agree, it needs to be revisited, and there could perhaps be another one that comes out of this. We're not saying that that can't happen, but we had to act upon the student concerns and the student need, and this is the best solution at this point in time that we can come up with. So we are moving forward with it, with not understanding that there could be other solutions that come through.
Okay. Well, just to let you know, I probably will bring that up in discussion that the process was particular, and there wasn't enough consultation necessary, and I probably will be proposing something along the lines of allowing council to look at alternate solutions and coming to a decision in July. And if this service is deemed necessary, still reaching that January 2019 implementation.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, but you
In July is when like the decision is made for like
That's more of a ballpark estimate, but just to give some more time to consult students, which from what Andrew told me wasn't done with as many students as could have been, and to look at what's the best solution for this issue. Whether it's a student
in the last meeting, we laid out what the type of consultation we're going to do, and we focused on consulting students with experience that the mission of the service would like speak to and try to address, right? So that's what we did, and like we've been working on SOP since February on the proposal. And I also met with the folks that started the vote no.
Okay.
I met with Cosmo, who started the vote no.
And what did he say?
And he, like, I wanted to hear about his concerns about the service, right? And so I took those concerns and tried to also reflect those concerns in our presentation today.
There are two small things in the proposal today that, if it's passed today, I would like to see changed. One is the mandatory. Yeah.
Is there like a sheet or whatever that like clearly
That you were here.
Yeah, I was there.
If we can do that, we don't usually do that. It's an open meeting, right? So we don't usually do that. Yeah.
Okay, good luck.
Okay, you can come back if you're on busy later.
Wait, what is it gonna be? I'm busy till 3:15. I have to run back.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's unfortunate. We might be done, but come back or like message me on Facebook or whatever. Okay? Okay.
So as for students, two small issues. One is the mandatory anti-racism training. Because there's a lot of peer review papers, training like this when it's mandatory.
But like the services that provide training to volunteers that come to the
Okay. Well, in that case, you might want to get trained a little clearer.
I just say volunteer, but those changes don't make it, like I don't say the word mandatory either, right?
So it's a little bit so clear.
yeah, I just want to make sure that like students are like actually coming to meetings and actually value
The whole mental health issue.
okay, so there's going to
If we expand that,
okay, great.
students will exclude, and we make dealing with racism one of the key points of this.
Well, we have Vegas, right? Which is open to all students. And also this service is open to all students. Yeah,
But we don't want the phrasing of it to make any students feel like they're excluded.
yeah, and that's not our intention. And those are things that you can bring up in the implementation process, right? Obviously, like the implementation, the proposal of the service, like it doesn't say that it's going to, you know, exclude any students on race. We just can't do that, right? Like it's not, you know what I mean? Like we can't do that. So, but I think those are points that you bring up through the implementation process as like we're getting reported to council to oh, like, so the service coordinators and product have determined what type of training this have done. How is this training gonna be? Like, is it open to the students, or like, is it clearly laid out that
Because
all students are available?
especially once you'd be advocating for UW staff and both ed staff to receive that mandatory training, which I guess isn't what was really on their mind. I might want to clear that up to
Yeah,
make sure.
and that's part of the education advocacy problem, right?
Yeah,
Like that's one of the
because statistics do show that when that type of training is mandatory, it actually decreases, in the US at least, it decreased diversity in a lot of programs because there was a bit of a backlash.
Yeah. But like again, I don't think I think that discussion is outside the scope of this proposal because we need to look at it from a higher level. Okay. And that's some of the
And I guess the lower level is where the issues of the proposal come in, or the process come in, and that's what I'll be bringing up.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Anyways, thanks for clearing some of that.
No problem.
I know you not just from the ESS meeting can suggest that, yeah, if there's enough support from.
We're gonna approve the agenda and something that first, and then Jennifer's gonna do first on the agenda as a discussion. Okay, special order.
Oh, then actually, there's a special order after all the reports.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's right. Oh, we'll do the executive
No, you just call it.
It's there's so much aviation has been consistently increasing at the time when GMS.
Oh yeah, no, I know people at EB who became That's interesting.
Oh, it did it.
Alright guys, we're ready to start whenever you're ready. Alright. Okay. So just to begin, we have to acknowledge that the University of Waterloo resides on Indigenous land. Okay. And so then the first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda.
So I move to approve the agenda. Give me a second.
Yeah. Wait. Sorry.
Did you have the changes?
Which ones? What you just emailed me?
No, point of information. We have to have a second before we can deliberate on that. So
Yeah, we need a second. So.
I don't know.
Yeah? Okay. No, I did not add any changes like since I've last sent it out to everyone, so that everyone has the same copy of the agenda. If there's anything you'd like added, you can bring up during new business.
Okay.
Second? Yeah.
Yep, no, I just wanted an amendment to the last agenda, the one that I had sent you, like the.
Oh, that was the minutes, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Change already?
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Alright, so next up is the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes from February?
Yeah, actually, we had some notes on them. So we move to approve.
And then a second? Alright, seconded by Nita.
So for one, there was in the minutes a discussion between myself and Brian on approval of principle, and the quotes from us are swapped. So I think it's just typing error. I would also like that included in the approval we give the secretary and speaker the rights to go through and correct grammatical and spelling mistakes because there's quite a few throughout the document. I think we should fix those before putting them on the website.
I fix those before, like when I go through again to remove all the draft watermarks, I remove all the everything through again.
Okay.
Those.
And I think that addresses most of my concerns.
Does anyone have anything else?
If you see anything in the minutes, please email me. Like as secretary, I can make non-substantive changes to the minutes. So if you see anything that needs correcting, I can just make that change and then republish them on the minutes website. So just like email.
In the former minutes, it did say board approves the minutes as opposed to council, which I think is just a templating error.
Alright, so does anyone have, with those changes, are we alright to approve the minutes? Okay. Seconded by Jen. Alright, perfect. Okay, so before we move into anything else, at today's meeting, we're gonna have a speaking time. So each counselor is gonna have 2 minutes to speak in a row kind of, and then you can be called on twice. If you would like to give up your time to a member of the gallery so that they can speak, they're welcome to, but the members of the gallery are not able to speak unless a counselor gives up the time for them. So if you guys would like to speak, like raise your hand and a counselor will do their best to accommodate you. Yes.
Like, quick point of information, in terms of the number of times you can speak to an item, that is amendable, as is the time limit you have to speak. So if you wish, or think counselors should have more time, you can also amend to increase the speaking time.
Yes. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything you need to clarify? All right. Yes.
Also, I put a sheet of paper and a pen on the back table. Hope it made its way all the way down. That's just to track us, so if you didn't write your name on that sheet of paper, if you could pass the paper along to whoever still needs to do that, that would be awesome. And that's just so we can track who is in this room and who is a part of the discussion, and later I can sync up your names if you actually said anything.
All right. So in that case, we are going to move on to the executive reports. So the first report is from our president, Jeff.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming up today. So I'll start off with the general meeting. We had our general meeting on Wednesday. We reported about north of 380 members that participated either in person or via proxy, which is the second highest in Fed's history. And one of the items on the agenda that passed that pertains to council is the fee increase of 20 cents for the racialized student-run service. And in addition, the $1 fee increase for the full-time staff that will help us with expanding our operational capacities of our student-run services. So that happened at the general meeting, and we have a motion on the agenda today for council to approve the creation of the service and a proposal in front of you as well. Secondly, the President's Advisory Committee on Student Mental Health finished their report on February 15th. I was a committee member that was part of putting together that report, and also a liaison and co-chair of the Student Experience Panel. So that document is going to be important because it's going to shape both the wellness and mental health advocacy of Feds for a couple of years to come, probably for the next 3 to 5 years. So it's a document that was revealed to the general public on March 14th when President Ferdinand Handelhofer had a reveal event which got north of 500 attendance. And so I believe that the report is a really good first step in addressing some of the concerns that were raised in the change.org petition last year after 2 suicides on campus. And I think the process, considering the timelines and the quality of the report, was really well done, considering some of the obstacles and some of the challenges around the timelines and the consultation with as many stakeholders as the committee went through. We had over 300 people that wanted to volunteer in the process, and we had to narrow that down to about 100. So I'm really confident about the PAC SMH, and if you have any questions on that, on any of the recommendations and what this means for the executive this year and going forward, please let me know, and I'm happy to speak to you about that. One of the issues that council this year has been really interested in is freedom of expression and we passed a policy in the fall regarding sort of council stance on freedom of expression. I've had numerous conversations with people on Senate, with upper administration, including the president, about this topic, and there seems to be agreement that we need to be proactive on defining both the terms of freedom of expression, academic freedom, and making sure that as an institution we're not perpetuating sort of this fallacy that upholding and advancing principles of freedom of expression and academic freedom are in contention with advancing principles of equity. So, and I think we're uniquely positioned as an institution to advance that message. The president and his part of his executive team believe that we are positioned that way, but it's almost, how do we do that without seeming like we're trying to get ahead of the curve of what's happening across the street, and sort of partnering up with all stakeholders and the community at large to make sure that everybody has an understanding on those terms. So there seems to be one of the counselors, Alexander, asked me if Senate is open to endorsing the Chicago principles of freedom of expression, and you know, I've had conversations. They seem to like the general wording, but they're not in agreement in terms of what tool the institution should use to actually convey that message to the larger community. So I think there's a window of opportunity over the upcoming year to further address this issue. But as part of our advocacy efforts, the president did have an event open to the community at Feds Hall that started those conversations around defining those terms and how it affects staff, faculty, and students. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. And then finally, I think I've invited some of you, if I have you in my personal social media networks, but as chair of UCRU, we've partnered up. UCRU is the undergraduates of Canadian Research Intensive Universities. We've partnered up with 8 student associations from across the country to host a virtual Facebook event with using the hashtags International Student School Account, WIL standing for Work Integrated Learning, and then hashtag UCRU Advocates, and then we'll use hashtag Feds Advocates to make sure that the full-time paid co-op and work integrated learning experiences of international students are actually counted when they're applying through the Express Entry program for permanent residence, because currently that is not counted. So we actually, myself, Andrew, and our partners from the U15 went to Ottawa in November and conveyed this message to over 50 stakeholders that we met there. And we've had really good follow-up. The co-sponsor on our e-petition is a House of Commons e-petition. Our co-sponsor is an MP from Vancouver East, Jenny Kwan, who's actually the vice chair for the Standing Committee of Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship. So she's influential on that committee, and that committee ultimately will be the one that is integral in making that type of policy change. So our goal, we only need 500 signatures to actually get a response back from the House of Commons. We're close to that already, and we have until June 16. But we want to use sort of targeted times during this, what's remaining in this term, and at the beginning of next term with new students on campus to really get as many signatures as possible to get UCRU's name out there and get this issue on the policy agenda at the federal level. Especially since it doesn't have any budgetary considerations. It's really something that can be done at any point of the year. So yeah, those are my updates.
Thanks. All right, thanks, Antonia. Jill, you're up next.
Thank you. So my updates are going to be a little bit shorter. So within the agenda my update within the agenda that I attached, just highlighting the work being done with the societies on campus. So we did wrap up our last committee of presidents meeting mid last week. And to highlight the 2 that we've had since our last council meeting, we've had some special guests come in. So Tony Monroe and Andrea Kelman from the president's office came and discussed just how engagement with students in conjunction with the university's president's office, not just with Fairden himself, but with that office. And then Tony Monroe talked about the new grant that Waterloo International is looking to give out to student, staff, and faculty. And so that has now been released in the daily bulletin as well and open up for all members of the University of Waterloo campus to participate in. We also talked about a really good conversation about what is society's role with mental health on this campus, and so we're just cleaning up the meeting minutes from that, but looking at society's playing a bigger role because they are on the grounds with students and obviously our students themselves, so really understand the impact that is happening on our campus at certain times and looking at how we can best work together cross faculty to be supportive among everyone. The Society's Relations Commissioner is working on how to get involved more with orientation and allowing societies that partnership to happen, as well as we're looking at making sure that the societies have their presence on our website. And lastly, I've also gone into pharmacy twice this month to check on how their society is operating up there and ensuring that we can have better partnership and to have some takeaways for main campus. Moving on to wellness, looking at the wellness days that we're looking to launch come spring 2018. So this project's been delayed a bit just due to other commitments, but we're really working on making sure that this project is completely developed in order to be launched in the beginning of spring. So right now we're working on their signature events and campaigns, the entirety of branding, because we are looking at having multiple campus partners, so ensuring that all of that is developed so someone can pick up the wellness branding and majority of the work will already be done for you. As well, we're working on finalizing the volunteer ambassador position, and so this is going to be another student leadership role that FEDS offers for students who are particularly involved in increasing the wellness on campus, which I feel like is a huge buy-in right now with a lot of students wanting to make that difference to help out their fellow constituents on this campus. And so we're developing that to be more centralized, and so we can reduce the pockets of wellness and hope to achieve more cohesive programming and events. Lastly, into random updates. Whoops, I just saw that it says October and November. That's not true. It's for March. So IAC finally wrapped up their last meeting, and something that we actually had time to do this year was talk about higher level purposes of our club system, which was really exciting to hear the students' opinions on what our club system is supposed to do and how we're achieving that, and then streamlining a better process for communicating that, and also just talking about into the weeds of what our club system is, but ensuring how we can make it the best that it possibly can be. Those of you who might know, wrap-up week just happened last week, so there was a healthy snack cart that went around every day. We had free massages in the Great Hall. Hopefully some of you got to enjoy that. We did Warrior Wind Down, which was a yoga event on Monday, and then we also did DIY energy balls. So we're trying to do a variety of different things that are to help you achieve your ultimate wellness. Volunteer appreciation, which if you're on council, you're invited to, is happening tomorrow at the Bomber. So we'll have some food and awards are given out, as well as an appreciation item. Cultural Caravan happened, and it was really successful. We had the highest live stream ever, if you will. And then we met this morning with the Student Leadership Committee to pick our Federation Student Leader Awards that are happening, the event will be happening in the next couple weeks. So happy to say that our leaders are picked, so stay tuned for the blurbs and reasons why they got picked. We had a partnership with Health Services last Wednesday on Spotlight on Mental Health, and so we talked about a lot of the resources on and off campus that are available to students who are experiencing things with their mental health. And lastly, I'm just working on a lot of transition with my successor, so that's taking up a good chunk of my time.
Perfect, thanks. So unfortunately, Brian and Andrew could not be here today. Brian included a council report that you guys all have. Did either of them leave anything for you guys to say, or no? Okay. All right, in that case, we'll just move on. Yes. Sorry, yes, questions for you guys.
So I guess I'll do it Tony first, and then Jill. You mentioned you mentioned the GM. Independent of the Racialized Student Service proposal, I was actually curious about the orientation fees. We moved those at the GM, and I spoke on behalf of that as well, from your portfolio budget to an independent portfolio budget, separate from the president's portfolio. Will that remain under the auspices of the total Fed's budget and still under the purview of Council Budget Committee? Or is that being separate from that oversight?
Separate. It would move under the first year orientation fee budget, which final approval, like we still administer that budget, but that final approval lies with board.
Okay, so that would still, in terms of administration of budget, that would still see budget committee in overall budget time. I believe that should be passed through the budget committee. I'd like to that looked into, because I don't think that's.
I can get back to you, but that would be
Because
the
those are
process.
membership dues, and council has strict oversight of all member dues, so that should not be going to board before it comes and is approved by council, just as a matter of point. If that is going to be the case, then on board, which I will now be sitting, I will be pushing to strike that down.
There might be some history there that would influence that process because the university has historically been like a partner with orientation and also has input into how that budget is spent.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the orientation fee counts as like a Fed's administered fee or if it's a university fee that the university then like gives approval of to Feds.
It's still a membership.
But it's the university who decides how that fee is processed.
Okay.
Not us.
Well, I'd like that on the, I don't know,
Do you want me
board
to-
transition, I certainly want it on the incoming board's transition so that I can hear it at board.
Most definitely a good thing to look into.
Yeah, because that's fairly curious to me. If we administer that fee, if it's not being overseen by council, that's a little bit disconcerting. So, sorry, you mentioned the freedom of expression policy and your lobbying efforts for Chicago principals in the Senate. I was wondering, when you said what tool the Senate uses to get that out there, I was wondering what that meant. Could you emphasize that a little bit? As far as I understand it, this will be a freedom of expression policy on the books for the Senate. Is this, if Senate were to pass it, what would how would they promote it or make students aware of it type of thing, or?
So the difficult part about this is that we're starting to like dabble into like the memorandum of agreement between the faculty association and the university. So, you know, the faculty really own what academic freedom is and the definition around that. So that's a barrier that we need to get over if we're going to have like a nuanced conversation about that. So, and no policies can sort of infringe upon that definition on the memorandum of agreement. In terms of the tool, it's not clear. That's what I meant. Like the Chicago principals, when I talked about it with the upper administration, they seem to agree like on a higher level they're good, but does it really do anything? Like, is that the direction that we want to do, or do we want to make a University of Waterloo made solution and be a leader in this conversation and bring some nuance to that conversation? So that's kind of where we're at. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess can we keep council appraised on the status of that then? Because that was, I think we included that in our motion from November.
Sure. Yeah, there just hasn't been any updates since our November meeting in terms of like actual results until that event that happened in March.
No, that's good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And can we see a written report from this? You brought up a bunch of stuff, especially with you, crew, and Senate. Can we see like a written report summarizing this, sent out with the minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, like there was an attaching error, so that's why it didn't make it to this agenda. But I can definitely give you a written report afterwards.
Sweet, thank you. Any questions for Jill? If other people have questions.
Does anyone else have any questions? Alright, go for it again.
Sorry, in regards to COPS, I was wondering if there's attendance data on that. We had previously spoken about how all the committees under council, including COPS as a council committee, should be reporting, sending like either through their chairs or whatever, sending reports to council about the nature of the businesses that happen there, the business that happens there rather, and including attendance. I'd be curious on that regard, both to report back to my student society on which board whose board I sit, as a counselor, and also just in general on how that looks and how we can improve COPS, because it's a solution from 2011 that might not be the best way to do it anymore, and maybe we can fix things a little better. So just curious in that regard. So from attendance, from reporting to council, and also from a COPS should feed back on itself and say, how can we improve this institution?
Okay, so
So three separate ideas there. I'd like the attendance data, if possible, from all the presidents or their proxies on the committee.
I'll attach those in the minutes for sure.
An update on the deliberations from COPS over the past academic year, if possible, and then opinions from the presidents actually on where they think COPS can improve and how we can make COPS work better for the societies type of thing. I think we should have sort of a feedback mechanism built into COPS, or at least look into that. And then with regards to the Society Relations Commissioner, I was wondering, there's a hiring process. Can we give recommendations for that? In terms of if like we know the people participating, can we submit recommendations on their behalf? Who would that go to you, to Savannah?
More like recommendations about like them?
Yes, individual recommendations for somebody for it.
Oh, the hiring has already been posted, like, so like for a new commissioner?
Oh, yeah, sorry. If we know somebody has signed up for it, and
Yes.
is
Oh.
interviewing us, can we provide a recommendation on their behalf? I didn't know if that was a conflict of interest or not.
I think that would be,
Okay.
yeah.
So we're good?
So the only thing is that, so Brian did include this in his report, but I'm going to quickly mention it, is the Budget Committee has been reviewing the budget procedure and how we can replace the current budget procedure, which is great in theory, but barely functional in practice, with a much better version. So we're looking into splitting the budget into a 4-month skeletal budget during the transition period between executives and outgoing executives and council and incoming executives and council. And then we are looking to have, in addition to that, an 8-month budget. Right now we're mostly in agreement on what's outlined. There's a couple things that are points of contention that we're still arguing through as the best way to move forward. So.
So anyone else? Yes.
Can I have more information on the petitioning for international students co-op experience to be included in there?
For sure. Is everybody on council okay if I send the information to Elizabeth, and then Elizabeth can send it via the council list if everybody is on the council list here?
Presidents are on the council list?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and also I've noticed that some of you around the table have already set going on the event, so feel free to share all of that with your networks. The more we share it, the more pickup we get.
So anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we move on? All right. In that case, we are going to move on to our special orders, where we have a presentation from the Associate Director of Health Promotions.
Can I give a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Antonio.
So Jennifer McCorson, Associate Director of Health Promotions, has been somebody that the executive have been working with a lot this year, and was actually one of the staff members that was in charge of that was an integral part of the package of each process as well, and even like some of the work that's been done on sexual violence prevention on campus and stuff. So she'll give a great lens on wellness and sort of put into context some of the recommendations of the PAC-SMH in relation to wellness. So.
Yeah, no, I'll just stand up.
Oh,
Just take my
okay.
turn.
Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone. And so I'm sorry, I know I recognize a couple faces, so if you've seen this presentation before, I apologize. Bear with me. But I wanted to come today because, as I said, this position of Associate Director of Health Promotion is newer. And I think a lot of it was born out of this whole idea with when we've been talking about mental health and wellness. You know, it's great, and I fully support increasing the number of counselors on campus and looking at treatment and intervention and supports, but I also recognize that I kind of call it like the ship that's going into murky waters, and we're kind of sinking and we're taking on water, and unless we turn the ship around, we're not gonna actually, we need to like almost take a different course. So I think this position was created to do some of that prevention work. So how do we keep people on campus, how do we keep students well, right? And not to say that's not going to take away from the treatments and the services that is at the other end of the spectrum, but how do we try to keep people well so that we don't have such a demand on our services at the other end? So that's why this position was created, and I like to come out because I want to talk to you guys, because my job really is about understanding what students want in terms of wellness and then putting some of those prevention initiatives in place. So I know we won't have a forum to have a huge discussion today, and because I want to be able to, you guys have a packed agenda, but I at least wanted you guys to have a face to a name. And if you want to follow up with me, or I can come and talk to societies, that would be really nice for me as well, to get to know you guys and what each faculty really wants. I'm happy to do that, and we can have further conversations. outside of this meeting. So I always like to put this up so you can know a little bit about my role and kind of how I view when we're talking about health and wellness is this is the approach that I take, and it's really about enabling people to take control over their own health, right? And moving beyond just you as an individual, looking at all those things around you that keep you healthy or prevent you from being healthy. So the reason I like to start my presentation with this is because we can give you guys all the information and skills and resources and supports that you want, and those are important and you need those. But unless we look at everything else going on in your environment, again, I think we've missed the boat, right? And so I often say to people, health promotion is not just health education, it's so much broader than that. And on that same note, it's often looking at these social determinants of health. And if maybe you're not from the applied health sciences faculty, that might not mean anything to you, and that's okay. But what that really means is I often talk to people about how health and being healthy and achieving health sometimes has nothing to do with your typical health, like health or healthcare at all. So if you look at that pie there, I'm sorry the red's kind of, but basically 10% of why you're healthy or not healthy or can achieve health has to do with your genetics and your biology. Another 10% access to care. Another 30% your health, your individual health behaviors, whether you choose to smoke, whether you choose to drink, whether you choose to be active, that's within your control. But a third to almost a half of the reasons why you can and cannot achieve health often has to do with what we call social ecological or social economic factors, or the social determinants of health. So often when I talk to people about health, it's looking at, what happened in your early childhood, whether you have housing, whether you feel included, whether you have a social safety network of people, and all those other things that we talk about when marginalized individuals and communities, often those things affect their health, whether it's gender or disability or race. So all of those things have an interplay. And so what I'm trying to bring to the university too is people understanding that we need to talk about health equity. We need to talk about all these things if we actually want to talk about health and wellness, right? We can't just keep putting out more pamphlets and campaigns. We really need to address some of these things. So that's where Antonio and I have talked a lot. And one of the recommendations of the President's Advisory Committee is to have a health equity committee, or I think that's what they're calling it, so that we make sure, like my job when I worked in public health is every time I talked about a new health and social policy, whether it was tobacco or healthy or a nutrition policy, I always asked my staff to put it through what was called a health equity impact assessment. And what we were simply doing was, okay, if we're going to introduce this new policy, are we disadvantaging any group, or are we decreasing those disadvantages? Because that's ultimately what you want. So that's kind of the lens I'm trying to bring to the conversation around wellness on campus. Oh, the other thing I should probably say, I mentioned it earlier, but health promotion, this is where you guys are so important. And again, the lens that I always come at things from a community engagement is I'm not here to say, this is what I think we should do. I think I can look at the literature and I can understand our statistics and data, but it needs to be collaborative. And you guys as the student voice need to really guide and drive this well-being strategy, and I think your voice is imperative. And finally, comprehensive approach. Again, as I said, health education, we can do health education until we're blue in the face. It's only going to get us so far. So what are we doing in terms of university policy? How are we looking at our social and physical environment? So again, when I was working in public health, there's a lot of literature that says even how you design a campus or a community really impacts people's health. And there's really good literature right now about community design for mental health and how you can design buildings and lighting. And so all of those pieces I think fit together when we're going to talk about a wellness strategy. And the reason I wanted to bring this to your attention is because this Okanagan Charter, which is a charter for health promoting universities and colleges, was developed in 2015, and places like UBC and SFU, they all came together and they said, let's look at a comprehensive framework to getting people to be healthy. And as I mentioned before, it's about embedding health into all aspects of campus culture, administration, and they have sort of 5 under their calls to action, 5 strategies that they want. If you're adopting this Okanagan Charter, which Waterloo has made a recommendation to do, how do you embed health into policy? How do you create supportive environments? How do you create a thriving community and a culture of well-being on campus? How do you, again, support personal development? And that gets back to your education, your skills. And then the last one is about, it's called reorienting campus services. And what that means to me and in the document is really, again, I think we have to get out of this mindset that the only people on campus that are going to solve the health crisis are people that have health in their name. So I work for Campus Wellness. Certainly that's my direct mandate. but I think everyone else on campus needs to see health and wellness in their mandate as well, whether they're faculty, whether they're a department, even talking to people like the Center for the Teaching Excellence, and so they're actually embedding health and wellness into the way that they train professors and work with them about how they teach, so that the way they teach, the style that they teach, and it helps to empower students around health and make sure that they're not doing undue harm with the way that they're teaching. So why should we adopt the charter? And I think, again, Antonio will speak to this. I think if we adopt it, it's showing a formalized commitment on campus that we are signing on to this, and we're using a common language and understanding that we need to apply multiple strategies and invest money into wellness. And so I just gave this example, and I think you guys are going to send out my slides, or they're maybe out already, so I won't go through it in depth, but this just speaks to how mental health, again, we can do the personal development, we can have supportive environments like more counselors, but it also talks to we need to look at our academic policies, and I think that's also a recommendation where making sure that any policy that we implement on campus goes through a lens of health and equity, right? So it's not disadvantaging anyone, it's not having undue harm. And so my role, as I've talked to you, is again about increasing visibility of health promotion, helping to develop a vision for wellness, helping to make sure everyone, health and wellness is a shared responsibility across campus. I think what will be interesting, and I'm going to be the first to admit I don't know the answer to this, in that I don't know where the next steps for the mental health implementation strategy is. We know that Professor John Hurdes has been given to chair that work. I don't know if it will continue to be very particular around mental health, or they'll think of wellness more holistically in terms of wellness strategy. But if I were to make a plug, this would be my recommendation, and again, this is just my recommendation. I would like the campus to stop using the word mental health all the time and start using the word wellness. And the reason I say that is because when you shift the conversation, I think when we go to talk about mental health, people automatically talk about mental health illness, and we talk about a downstream approach of we need more treatment, we need more counselors. But if we shift the conversation to wellness, wellness can mean anything to anyone. And how you define wellness, maybe your mental health, maybe your physical health, maybe your spiritual health, that's okay. But I think it's going to shift it more to a preventative upstream. So that would be, I think if we could start using that language and include mental health and wellness, that would be great. And then finally, my role, again, is to promote the charter. So what does this mean for you guys as feds? I think you guys do wellness, right? Like, you guys advocate for students, you advocate for policies that affect the health and wellness of students. You're doing wellness initiatives, as Jill talked about, the wellness days. So all I ask is, and with the work you guys do in your own societies, like I know you guys do your own wellness stuff. You guys talk about having therapy dogs. So all I'm asking you to do is expand when you think about those wellness initiatives, how you're thinking about wellness and underlying reasons for wellness, and looking at advocating for some of those social determinants of health. And then again, if there's a larger university wellness strategy, what kind of role do feds want to take? What kind of leadership role? What do people, like, ever since the launch last week where Faradin spoke, I probably had, every single student came up to me and says, I want to be involved. I don't know how, but I want to be involved. So I think we really need to look at how you guys as feds and as students and societies and faculties can be involved in driving this. So that's really all that I wanted, just so that you guys know who I am. And as I said, if you want to reach out to me, you want to talk more about health promotion, I'm always happy to meet with anyone. Or if you want me to come and talk to your societies, I'm happy to do that. The other thing I was going to say is Eleanor, sorry, I should have introduced Eleanor Evel. She's a Master of Public Health student doing some work in campus wellness. She's actually doing an assessment, a situational assessment of our mental health training on campus and how we could be offering more and look at it differently. So we're looking at evaluating what we're currently doing and making recommendations. The other thing Eleanor's looking at, though, is with the PAC SLC expansion, there's going to be, there's 400 square feet for a wellness health promotion space. And I have no idea, because I'm not a student, how we could use that. So Eleanor's talking to certain groups about what you guys might want to see in terms of a health promotion wellness space. Do you want it to be interactive? Do you want it to be a hangout spot? Do you want it to be a peer-to-peer teaching opportunity and education in that spot? So would you guys be okay? Eleanor sent a link out to like a quick 3-question kind of like Qualtrics survey, and if you're interested in a couple quick questions about what you guys see would be really cool to have as part of a wellness space, we would really like any of your feedback. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you guys have any questions? And if you don't, on the spot, you're welcome to email me. My address is on the PowerPoint. Yeah?
Yeah, one point in the presentation, you mentioned embedding wellness into your staff teaching and how you teach students in lectures. I'm just really curious about how this is being done and what we're doing to make sure that this is working, that professors or faculty or staff are changing or at least adapting to the way that we'd like to encourage wellness. I've had a few teachers, professors who, in my opinion, definitely don't teach or lecture in a way that supports this and give undue and unneeded stress to students. So I'm just really interested in how this is being done.
Well, I think a couple things. I think Antonio will probably speak to as part of the report. Like there was an academic panel as part of the President's Advisory, and I know they've made some very specific recommendations around changing certain, whether it's exam scheduling or there's rankings. So there's, I think, some policy stuff that probably will come to light out of this. In terms of teaching style, again, because I'm not a prof and that wouldn't be my area of expertise, but I am meeting with the Center for, I keep getting the name wrong, Teaching Excellence, actually next week, to talk to them about that, because I've heard they do really great things, but I think where it falls down is whether profs are willing to go see them and whether they want to get that feedback, because again, my understanding is that a lot of profs, the ones that go to those centers are probably ones that already want to teach and learn how to better teach and better understand their students. So maybe it's about, again, if it goes back to health is everyone's responsibility, maybe there's a way to build into tenure track that you must demonstrate that your teaching is congruent with positive wellness and health. So I think there's good opportunity when we talk about mental health implementation. The only thing I do know in the literature, like experiential learning is huge around, because that's about engagement, right? So class engagement, that's huge around wellness. So I guess my answer is stay tuned. I think it's a great question, and lots of opportunities, I think. Let's take advantage of that.
Sorry. Information. If people in the audience want to talk, please just raise your hand. Someone will yield you time. If you want to ask questions, just leave it to them.
And I think Victor, you were next.
Hi. Hi.
Thank you for coming, Jennifer. And I actually have a question for your colleague. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Eleanor. What you are, I guess, looking into is something that is of interest to some of us who've been looking into mental health. So why is it that it's not mandatory training campus-wide for instance, QPR or mental health first aid? It seems something. It seems that that's very. It was confusing to a lot of students within the Faculty of Arts as to why this was a no-brainer, and also we wanted to ask what the feasibility of something like that would look like. Is it money, and how much would it be like campus-wide? Is it something that we could implement within feds? So I don't know, Antonio, if you want to touch on that too. But yeah.
Well, those are all really great things to bring up, and they're all questions that we've been asking ourselves as well. In terms of the feasibility of making training mandatory for everybody who interacts with students, there are definitely some challenges with that. I think we were talking about academic freedom in terms of like the faculty. That's something that's difficult to navigate, because if you want to mandate that faculty take training, that the academic freedom policies definitely make that difficult. I'm actually meeting with some of the faculty association this week to maybe get some clarity on that, to inform some of the recommendations that I'm going to be making. And I don't know if that really answers your question, because we're trying to answer that question ourselves. Exactly.
I think if I can jump in.
Yeah.
I think that was the biggest thing I heard out of the President's Advisory. I was kind of standing off to the side, and every single person that came over to talk to me was like, I don't understand. I don't understand. What does that mean? And it's a good question. I can't speak for Ferritin, right? I don't, he made a comment. So I think it does get tricky, because the mandatory legislation that happens on campus is legislation that's provincially mandated, right? So women's training, violence and harassment in the workplace. So I think if that's something that students feel strongly about, I think you guys can talk about if that's something you want to advocate for. I think, yeah, there's huge opportunities again, maybe.
Yeah, and no, and Eleanor hit it on the head. It goes back to the definition of academic freedom. Even when we're talking about accessibility, and even like supporting accessibility accommodations, like some professors can challenge an accessibility need for a student based on like, oh, it infringes on my pedagogical teaching, etc. Right? So it's kind of like it's a hurdle that we need to be able to work with faculty on, and starting on the front of mandatory is not the best way of starting that conversation.
Sorry, Alex.
So I have a question kind of related to that. I completely understand the stance on not having mandatory training because I'm not a big fan of making that mandatory, but what resources are available right now for optional training if a professor, faculty member, or staff member wants to learn QPR, or is it the first QP?
There's also
mental health first aid. If they voluntarily choose to do that, what resources are available now, and what is being planned in the future for that?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, there actually is a lot of resources. So all of the training that's offered, so more feet on the ground, mental health first aid, QPR, assist, are available to any employee of the university, and typically it's run through our counseling department. But that was the whole reason why Eleanor is doing this assessment, because I think, I don't think we're doing it well. Like, I shouldn't say that because they're my counseling colleagues. I don't think we're doing it as efficiently, as effectively as we can. So a couple things to that is, as part of the recommendations of the President's Advisory, it actually talks about hiring a full-time training coordinator for the university. Because we know, as we talk about all the time, counselors often get pulled away to deal or to do one-on-ones with students. So sometimes if they don't have a huge number that enroll in training, they cancel it or they ask for people to come in. So I think we're looking at, you know, are we meeting the objectives that we've set out? How many people are coming? Who's being trained? And I think with that, it goes back to your question about mandatory. And maybe the answer isn't about mandating training, because often when you mandate training, people do it just because they have to do it. That doesn't mean they believe in it, they don't buy into it, they may not pay attention to it, and it's I call it a bum and seat kind of exercise, right? So maybe it's about getting true buy-in, because we have really good training, and people start talking about it, and then it's like, have you gone to that training? And then we get sort of a groundswell, and people feel that they really value it, and it really, I think you always have to ask people, what's in it for me? People will only go to training if they're like, what's in it for me?
Yeah, and I think also you hit the nail on the head as well on the incentivizing faculty instead of making it mandatory. Like, and there's opportunities through like the tenure and promotions committee, if the deans are actually amicable to, actually creating that as part of, you know, the community service aspect, or when we evaluate faculty, it's 40 research, 40 teaching, 20% community service. So like it could be incentivized through that process.
Okay, sorry. So Seneca, Katie, and then Nikta.
So you heard me talk with you at length at EAC about this, so I'm going to shy away from the points that I've already handed off to you with Andrew. But recently, an MPP Han Dong was on our campus talking about international student issues, and one of the big focuses was mental health. And I was at that roundtable with Andrew and some GSA and other Fed's undergraduate representatives. And one thing that stood out there, especially from non-white communities, English-speaking communities, or English as a first language communities, was that counseling and other services that we have on campus, first off, aren't marketed in other languages, right? We have like 24% of our campus, based on 2017 headcount data, is international, of which a humongous percentage is from Chinese and Indian origin, subcontinental origin, and a large portion is from other minority groups whose English is not their first language. We don't market to them, particularly Chinese. Chinese on this campus would be, and I think for Feds as well, we should start marketing in English and Chinese, is we need to reach out to people in their native language, or we're never going to reach them, period. The second thing is counseling, and one, this is another student brought this up too, is, and it was prevalent in the Chinese community representatives that were there, and they brought up that members of the community that graduated, they actually switched out of engineering and into like psychology and psychiatry so that they could start a counseling service for Chinese students catering specifically to the cultural background, the familial background, and the language, because that's a shortcoming of our current institutional model in addressing this problem. And I was hoping that maybe you could take back those recommendations or escalate them to the right persons. I don't know what we'll need, especially if we're getting more counselors based on PAC SMH's recommendations. We should look into getting counselors who would be able to speak languages like Spanish, Chinese, Hindi, maybe an Aboriginal language. I don't know what our distribution of Aboriginal students on campus is, stuff like that. I would say direct that to Andrew as well, because he was there for that conversation and took some pretty diligent notes, as did the Vice President Student Life for the University Administration. But it was a great roundtable, and those comments were brought up. The other thing besides language was cultural background. There was an Iranian member there, and he brought up that things work very differently. He comes from a very different socio-political landscape, and he said in order to effectively get counseling help at counseling, the times he's gone, and he's a grad student, but he said in order to get effective help there, he had to explain, first off, the socio-political background of his country, then he had to explain the religious layer on top of that, and then he had to explain the cultural and linguistic layer. And he's not able to communicate this in the language that's most comfortable to him, which I understand there's obviously going to be limitations with that, but if we could, in terms of how we counsel, if we could start to address the cultural and socio-political background, I think would be beneficial.
So I'm going to answer your question quickly, because I know you guys have a packed agenda, so I don't
worry about the
Oh, no, that's okay.
Yeah.
Is everything you said completely true? And actually, a lot of what you said is in the report. So doing more training with some of our counselors, or our counselors, here around cultural sensitivity and marginalization and just stuff we talked about, social determinants of health. So yes. 2, making our services more culturally appropriate. So we actually have hired a Mandarin speaking counselor, I think, to work in the math faculty, I think it was. So we're looking at all those options, definitely. And another thing, actually, it's in the report, but one of the things that I have a Master's of Public Health student starting in the spring term is to actually do what you just talked about, an assessment of what are the health needs of some of our international students, because there's lots of literature out there, and I don't think we're necessarily meeting the needs. So what, not only even just in terms of service, but in terms of exactly what you've talked about, where when we have students come and talk to us about sexual health, and if they have a totally different cultural background, that conversation looks totally different. So I think I'm not just even talking about cultural differences, I'm talking about any sort of differences, whether LGBTQ, individuals with substance misuse, individuals who have experienced sexual violence. So I think we do need a lot more training and understanding and different ways of approaching certain populations. So yes.
Okay, respond quickly.
Yeah, in terms of co-op, I'm wondering, do we already allow kind of call-in and scheduling of on co-op with counselors? Because if not, we're a co-op school. Our entire infrastructure, be it from counseling and mental health services to actual health services, should be predicated on and structured around co-op.
And that came out as part of the President's Advisory, and I think will be
Can
addressed.
we call in and schedule meetings via phone or what?
I know, so Tom Rattan, who's the Director of Counseling Services, is really good, and he's working with staff that, we do have counselors at satellite locations when people need it and are in crisis. He does everything in his power to, whether, and he said this publicly, where if someone's in Italy doing a co-op, he will do everything in his power to either link them to services in Italy or do a call or a phone conversation. The same is true with our sexual violence response coordinator, Amanda Cook, who does everything in her power. Just because you're not physically on campus doesn't mean that you don't have access to the same services. But I know we can do better.
Do you guys know, do you guys interface with one of the Fed services, is the International Co-op Connection, and with the International Canadian Student Network, which might be good to interface with in this regard, because there's a Feds kind of builds a co-op community in, say, Boston. If there's a bunch of students in Boston, Co-op Connection puts students in touch, and they work pretty closely with the CBE, and so that might be worth reaching out to kind of build those bridges there, where there's already, without having to rebuild the wheel.
Yeah, I think lots of opportunity. It's an exciting time. I know you guys might not feel that way because you've waited for this for so long, and there has been a lot that's happened on campus, and I'm not taking away from that experience because it's been hard. I know it's been hard, but I think I'm excited about people really, really want to make a difference, and there's, and that, I think the first step is the President's Advisory.
All right, so it was Katie and then Nikta, and then are we good to wrap up? Is anyone else? Okay.
So I'm backtracking a fair bit since we've progressed significantly since. I think that my biggest concern, especially on the topic of training for professors and training mandatory training versus incentives, is that the people who probably need this training the most, in my opinion, are the people who've been here for 20 years. They're no longer tenure track because they have tenure, and they're the people who are sort of set in their ways, and these are the people who need this training the most. And my concern is that there are very limited incentives that we can offer them.
I think your concern's echoed by many.
Yeah.
And I think we're trying to look at creative ways, again, around the mandatory training, what's incentivized.
Yeah.
All right, so then Nikta.
I'm so happy you touched on that because that's exactly what I was going to bring up. So we're always asking ourselves, why do these things happen on campus? Why? What could we have done differently? And here is a perfect example of something that we can do, yet there's a policy in place that's acting as a barrier to that. So when I think of mandatory training, I think that financially, when students say we want more counselors, what I'm going to talk about is the fact that this is preventative. Exactly what the first point that you mentioned when you came here, that we want to prevent these sort of things. So financially, there's not enough money to keep hiring these counselors. So is there a way that we can overturn or just revamp the academic freedom policy? That's what you said it was called?
No, it's the academic freedom is stipulated under the memorandum of agreement between the faculty association and the university. So it's not an actual policy, but it's what governs the relationship between the faculty association and the university.
Yeah, and another.
So it's not a policy.
Oh, okay.
We don't have any say in that. That's just between the faculty and the university.
Then how have you addressed this to the university?
No, point of information, that's not entirely true because the Board of Governors signs off on those memorandum and we have student seats on the Board of Governors that Antonio appoints. So that's...
Yeah, but I can speak in the air. It doesn't mean I'm going to be heard on that issue.
Vote it down.
No.
So I think though you guys have an incredible voice, and you guys as society representatives too, like, can you take back some of these conversations because you are representing your student groups and have those conversations, have those very open, honest conversations at some of your societies. I think you guys have a voice.
Okay, so a quick response from Nikta.
I wasn't done mine, so that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I also am not a big fan of incentivizing faculty. Like, why should I have to incentivize a faculty member to be compassionate, to care about the students of their institution? Like, frankly, I personally don't care that they have these old school views. We're human beings. We're paying to be here. This university ultimately is a business. So why aren't they properly trained to know how to interact with their clients, per se?
So here's something really upstream that you can think about is talking to your faculties about, and again, I don't know how this conversation happens, but when you look at talking to them about hiring practices, when they bring on new professors, what are they looking for? Are they looking for, I know probably hands down, you're probably looking for publications, experience, but you know, are you hiring professors that have a huge amount of emotional intelligence? And what that means is people that have the ability to understand how what they do affects others and how, you know, and do they have compassion? Do they have empathy? So maybe you can influence really when they're looking at hiring practices for faculty. Like that would be, when we talk about upstream stuff, that's upstream. That's prevention type stuff. It's hiring the right people at the university.
The people currently here.
I know, I understand what you're saying, and I think it needs to come from both ends, not.
Yeah. Okay, so I said we were gonna wrap up this conversation. Are you guys alright with sending emails expressing
Or
your
if you
thoughts,
want me to come back to another meeting, or I'm happy to meet outside with you guys as student groups.
Can I just move to
We need a
extend the
second.
speaking time for like 3 more questions or whatever?
Sure.
From
Do we have a
people who
second?
have not thus far spoken.
I second it.
Alright, so then it was, Jennifer, Rebecca, and then you, Kat.
I just want to bring up also that something that's maybe becoming a larger problem is co-op, so wellness tied to co-op. And I think that if you're talking about training staff, the first people you need to look at are CETA employees, because when someone, So when there are problems and you go to your advisor, very often their response is entirely lacking. So if someone needs training on how to deal with students that are under stress or that need help, we need to go to SICA first, because like, personally, like, on the program, I've had very lacking advisors, and they definitely contribute to like this culture of like unwellness, or whatever you want to call it, or whatever. So if there's someone you guys want to work with first, I would definitely go to SICA.
I think you make a very valid point. Like, in my opinion, I think the landscape has really changed in the last 5 to 10 years. So, you know, I'm thinking of academic advisors, because a lot of them come to training, and a lot of advisors that are your first point of contact as students, they were never hired 10 years ago thinking that they were coming in to do this. Like, they were hired to in a very different role, and I think that role has changed over time because of the shifting landscape. So this gets back to, so then how do we support the people that are currently here with training? And it's training beyond mental health. Like, so at the University of Calgary, they don't even call their training mental health training, they call it the Community Helpers Program. And so they train people for how do you have empathy, how do you do active listening, how do you support, so thinking about how we do training differently, and then thinking about maybe some job descriptions and roles need to change within departments and within faculties, that you have sort of champions or advocates or a triage system that goes when the student comes to you, like where does that person need to actually go and who do they need to talk to? So I think, yeah, we're talking about a systems change here, really.
So Rebecca.
I just wanted to add on to what Jennifer said. I feel like co-op is definitely one of the places that does require this support. I've had personal interactions. I know of other people, faculty friends, who've had interactions with co-op advisors when they've been in very tough situations in co-op, and it's been very lacking. And if they're our first point of contact, I definitely want to reiterate that they do need to have some sort of training where they're at least more empathetic, if nothing else. The other thing I wanted to touch upon is the fact that this needs to be marketed towards people more. So I know I come from an Indian background, mental health is still really taboo, right? So that's not something I can have an open discussion with my family, with my friends back home, but I know that I can have these resources here, and it's because I've looked into it. It hasn't been marketed to me as an international student. So I definitely think that the services that are currently available, if they have to be affected, they need to be marketed better. Yes, definitely to what Seneca said about different languages, having them more accessible, but even what it is there right now, I could tell you right off the bat that at least 30% of the students have no idea it exists.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, again, sorry, I keep referencing back, because a lot of what you guys are saying has been discussed at the President's Advisory, right, in the panels. So I think that exact point about marketing, having a almost one-stop shop / portal where, because I do think a lot of people are doing, like in various faculties, a lot of people are doing great work too. I don't want to take away from the assets that we have at the University of Waterloo, but I think we need to market that, right? People need to be aware of the good things that are happening, and then I think there's things we can work on as well.
So Kat.
I guess mine is more of a comment. I kind of disagree with you, Nick, on your point about how it is the responsibility of teachers and professors at this university to consider their clients, because to many regards, a lot of these professors, with the exception of lecturers, obviously are doing much more than just lecturing to students, though I agree that there should be a bit more compassion that might come from a lot of professors with regards to mental health and understanding, like empathetic problems like Rebecca was talking about. I do think this report and the changes that are coming forward are really good. Your comment on the changing landscape that has developed with regards to conversations about mental health and advocating a bit more, especially on the student and administration side, will bring a lot of change. But yeah, I think we do have to understand that there are some professors that might need to have a little bit more encouragement. So I think your past comments kind of answered your question.
I think you're right. We're trying to play catch up on an issue that has really quickly become the main issue, right? Around when we talk about wellness. Like, I was at university 20 years ago. That's kind of dating me, but there was no talk of mental health. And not to say that it wasn't there, but I think I appreciate the stresses that you guys face and the changing landscapes when it comes to cost of tuition, and so I think we're all trying to figure out how do we quickly get ahead of it. And so we're trying to play catch up. And I think I give all of you guys a great amount of credit, because you are the ones that, with your own colleagues and your own students, you support them in their mental health issues as well. And I think we talked about that too, like how do we better support you as students when you have friends, because this gets back to, this is an own everyone on university at the university should have a responsibility to play, right?
Yeah, I agree on that collective responsibility point, and I know Jill touched on a little bit earlier about our last Coucil meeting, talking about the responsibility of student societies on mental health, and I'm happy to discuss that later if anybody wants to. But yeah, I think the responsibility is falling on everybody, and I think we're finally recognizing that, so I look forward to seeing what this changes in the administrative side.
All right. Yeah, well, as I said, I'm happy to come back. I like to talk, or I'm happy to meet with you guys separately. Just drop me a line if you ever want to come by my office and chat and you have ideas.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And I'm sure for everyone who commented today, like an email to that effect, like of what you just said, would be helpful just so to help everyone remember exactly what was said.
And if you don't know how to reach out to Dawn or anyone else, send an email to your counselors and we will direct you through it.
Yes. Okay. Ready here? Yeah. All right. And so with that, we are going to move into general orders. So the first thing we have on our agenda for general orders is a discussion on the student concerns about campus dentist, and that was brought by President.
Yeah, so this comes from a couple places. So I actually didn't know this was a problem because I don't use the Fed's dental plan very much at all. I have one at home, so I didn't need it. But a lot of students do use it, and it's one of the more popular plans considering health care is covered in this country. And apparently, and I wish Brian were here because he'd know more about the services side, but I'm hoping you guys know this information too. Is the campus dentist in the SLC, is that a Fed's operated business, or do we lease out the space to them? Okay, well then if we're leasing it, then they accept our plan, I imagine. Yes. I would like us to exercise a little bit of financial pressure on them, either removing a plan from being serviced there, or threatening their lease, because as far as I've been made aware from my constituents, it is they have a serious problem with taking advantage of students who don't know any better. So some background here. I'm in the M&S program, Materials and Nanosciences program, and two students in M&S came to me and complained about issues with the campus dentist. And they went, so I'll run you through one of their stories that they contacted me about, and I reiterated for Elizabeth in an email earlier. And that was, students have been routinely lied to, or information has been exaggerated to them, or they've been taken advantage of when using the service. This was brought to my attention because of these M&S students, but one of them was told they had 7 cavities of dire need of being fixed, and 2 that needed to be filled immediately by the campus dentist. They thought this was pretty rash since they didn't go in for a tooth pain complaint or anything like that, and they got a second opinion at a private clinic, not too far from here, not the plaza, but there's one further down the road that also accepts the Fed's dental plan, so they went there, and they were told that they had 2 cavities, 0 in dire need of being filled, and the private clinic offered complimentary x-rays to do like consulting on whether or not it was needed. And they said, and she had brought her x-ray scans from the campus dentist, and was told that the x-ray scans that the campus dentist had taken were completely worthless. Like you could not draw conclusions from them. They were done very poorly, and that when she asked, well, what did they mean by the 7 cavities? And the doctor said, well, it looks like you have depressions in your teeth, like you're grinding your teeth in your sleep. It's not actually like a cavity. You just have, your teeth are being worn down. That's slightly different. It's not nearly as problematic. And so I looked into this a little bit more after the second complaint, and that's why it's on this one and not on the previous month's agenda. And if you were to just search campus dentist Waterloo Feds or campus dentist Waterloo SLC, you will see every post from Reddit on this matter going back like 5 years or 6 years is about how it's a scam, how people have been taken advantage of there. I'll read off a couple points here. I was told I have 9 cavities, of which 5 need to be filled, and that the remaining 2 wisdom teeth also need to be removed. All as soon as possible. My insurance will only cover up to about $900 out of pocket, and I've never had a cavity in my life, although I have been to a dentist in the past 3 years. I brush my teeth pretty religiously. On that post, there's upwards of 23 comments that discuss individual experiences also with the campus dentist. So I don't know if we can puts a little bit of financial or lease side pressure on them, but that's a little bit unacceptable to be taking advantage of students like that, especially when you don't know where to go to refer. You're not like, we aren't dentists, you know, and dentistry is expensive. So if you don't know any better, then they're taking advantage of their position to get money from either Fed's insurance or from students out of pocket. I find that pretty unacceptable.
So the first person who wants to speak is Jason Small. All right, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so I was just quickly looking up at Center for Speaking. So for anyone who wants to know, Campus Dentist is a private business that rents space in SLC. So we have no affiliation with Fed other than finding a lease with space. So I personally see maybe a appropriate starter action. Like I think there's an issue where people might think that they're affiliated with the university in some way, that maybe there was health services or something when they're not. So maybe just even as like a simple starter measure, putting up some sort of sign saying outside and saying that there's no affiliation with the university or the Federation of Students, might be a good starter action.
Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
I wanted to ask Seneca, have you spoken to Brian about this?
I was actually hoping to talk to him. I like was formalizing all of this and trying to put together like 6 years worth of complaints from the internet that I found. And no, I tried to swing by. I talked to Brian recently, and he wasn't available. Okay. Well, he was actually running to a meeting and said, "I'm back to back. Can't talk now." And I was hoping he'd be here today, but he wasn't. So. But yeah, if it's something we lease out, I don't know if we can put any pressure on it, or if you guys can look into it when your next executive board meeting. But it's really disconcerting that this is the case. So if we have any means to it, including a sign saying, you know, this service is a scam outside of their business center, if we can do that without humongous liability on us, I think we should. Just like I think we should put out like on our website, do not rent from these housing institutions because they're terrible. I know Andrew's looking into that, but there's liability issues with that too.
So we'll talk about it as an exec team tomorrow morning on an exec board, and then we'll see if there's a possibility this sounds like something that we might escalate to the board level. But thank you for bringing up the concern. It's a legit concern. So.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we move on?
Just like, Senator, feel free to send that along to us when it's ready, or even if it's partially ready with your evidence.
Yeah,
like,
shoot an email.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. So if no one else has anything they would like to talk about, we can move on to our next discussion item. So it's just, I'd like to discuss the idea of removing all minutes on the Fed's website that are more than 5 years old. So it means that like you'll be able to see like your whole kind of university durations minutes, so, like from what time you started, graduated, and then after that, like there'll still be a copy kept in the Fed's office if you actually like we're not destroying them, but they just won't be publicly accessible. Is that anything? Yes.
I recently was reading regarding federal government and provincial government audits and standard practice for other corporations in this matter. I would recommend we do 7 years, not 5 years, with 1 year buffer on either side of the 5 year period. Or sorry, with 2 years prior back. The reason I suggest this is because the standard period for audits and the standard period for evaluations of documentation like that is 7 years. So we should try to stick to the government standards in that regard.
That's for being able to produce documentation, not publicly making documentation available.
Yes.
So I'm not.
That's it.
So you just want to keep the.
It was just to comply with.
Available.
Just to comply with that notion. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, just as a response, like we're not destroying it, so we would be able to produce it no matter what. Like we're just talking about removing it from the website.
Yeah.
But I think Katie was next, and then Nick, and then Harsh.
What's the motivation for removing it? Like, why would we take it off the website?
There's just not much value in it, and the quality of them does go down over time.
Yeah. As someone who was on council during that time, I can attest to the level of bad those minutes are and how inaccurate and potentially misleading they can be, which is why I definitely support what Elizabeth was saying. If it was up to me, I wish they could be destroyed, but there's a reason why in our meeting minutes they acknowledge Antonio, Andrew, Sasha, AJ, for basically revamping the way that the meeting minutes are done. And that's because what we have now is very well done, very accurate, and pale. And what we had before pales into comparison to what is currently published. And part of being the Federation of Students is ensuring that what is published is very accurate and transparent. But if we have something that is inaccurate, and then we are kind of going against that. So yeah, no, this is super important.
All right, Harsh. Sorry? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay, perfect. Sorry. Okay. Also, Jen.
I was just wondering, if you look off the website, can any member of student body still request older minutes? Or how's the process?
We're legally required to allow it.
So anyone who is a part of the Federation, so requesting minutes. But this won't be
I believe also anyone who was part of the Federation during which, if they were part of the Federation during the time period in which those minutes took place, I think they also have a right to see those the documentation, but not problem.
I'm not sure, we can look into that. But yeah.
Point of information, this is a discussion item, right? Like sort of getting the temperature on council to see if we move forward with whatever needs to happen to do this.
Well, it's an old business, so if there wants to be a motion, there can be a motion.
I think we should like do our due diligence and really figure that out.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to contribute?
Yeah. One other point actually, if since this is an operation, a fairly operational matter, I mean, we probably have to approve it since they're our minutes as well, in my Cameral's manner. I would imagine if this goes to board, I would like at board the discussion to focus around as well that we enhance minute record keeping, period, because there seems to be very poor records for anything past 10 years ago-ish, and that's after like people hunt through emails and all sorts of other stuff. So if we can like create a central database that officers of council, officer of board, executives can log into and say, view all minutes from a period of time, I think that would be fairly reasonable.
Do you have any input as secretary?
There's an investigation currently ongoing as to like more centralized documentation for council, and board currently has like a SharePoint site that it uses for exactly that. There is also 2 documents now as to like how minutes and agendas and things should be prepared, which are going to continue to be passed down to future secretaries. I think one of them is really aimed at the Secretary of the Corporation, but we can make that document for council as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we move on? Okay, cool. Oh,
so is this going to board?
Board will have to vote on it. Yeah.
Both parties will have to vote on it.
Yeah.
Do we have to vote?
Well, yeah, because it's our minutes, and we require in our procedures that our minutes be made publicly available. So.
Are we not doing that now?
Yeah, I thought we didn't have to.
Yeah.
Antonio said he wanted to make this a deliberate discussion item, rather than a decision.
What's our next step then?
Well, the reason board would need to get involved with this is because like.
Oh, you want to get board involved for the legal risk,
yeah,
and then come back to council.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So both bodies need to.
Just for formality's sake,
can we just delegate it to board?
That's what I was about to say. Can we delegate the entire matter to the board and then come for final approval from council?
Great.
So can we say something to the effect of, be it resolved, council requests minutes older than 5 years, during 5 years during which there are during the academic tenure of a student on campus. Shall not be put or shall be removed from the Fed's website, but stored in archive in the Federation of Students office, accessible to students upon request or members upon request, and task the board to explore a method to implement this and report back to council for final approval. Something like that.
What's the timeline of that? Sorry.
Yeah.
Between now and the next meeting, probably.
Okay.
We could put a timeline in there. The board has 1 month to send the results back to council.
Okay.
Sorry, so we're going to final approval, not a report on what happened?
I would say a report and final approval of the action, because the action of removal has to be.
Oh, you want to give them, you want them to do it, and then council decides whether to revert it? Or like, do you want us to be like a ratification?
Like,
or
board,
like an
board
approval?
recommends actions to council.
I actually think we should probably just task the board to take care of it and just approve it in principle now for the board to act on.
Yeah.
And then if there's no dissent at the next meeting, then we will need the
We should just do like a ratification.
Sure.
Yeah.
And give the board a 1 month turnaround time on that.
So Seneca, you're good with that?
I'm moving on.
Do you have a second? All right, seconded by Stephanie. Sorry, Stephanie.
Next.
Well, not just that post. I was asked, like, over the course of this past year, I was roughly logging it's about 250 per time that I've done. So when I saw the last Reddit post, I was like, all right, fine, I'll make that.
I'm done.
It's more symbolic.
There we go.
Besides, it's a fun way to end up here, right?
I'm just gonna send this to you. So I can,
Sure, Facebook?
That's of course what's dangerous, because like calling this range
the last clause is the one that I thought.
I wouldn't put decreasing quality over time, whereas like old minutes from more than 5 years ago were not following standard template and were lacking in clarity or something like that.
Well, there's a reason we acknowledge you guys for fixing it, so it's meetings post that. I mean, sorry, yeah.
Any resolution comes to that, to this ratification.
To this effect or ratification?
I actually didn't
To
do
this
that.
effect,
It was
the ratification
Andrew's
by the
thought.
next
Oh,
council.
okay, sorry, that I
By-
understood.
Yeah.
That gives them
Not take
1
credit
minute
for that
period
one.
to make it happen.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Sorry, so
Oh,
awesome, I thought you did that too.
I had one more bit for the resolve that is, minutes shall still be made accessible and available to students or members upon request in the Federation's office.
It's specifically in the office, so it's not something that they email out. I prefer it that way.
I don't know if we can legally do that. At least they have to be accessible. So that's up to the board to decide if the lawyer has to consult on that.
Because if it's emailed out, then non-members could have it, so if they come into the
That's
office
correct.
and get it.
They can take a picture of it.
Shall still be available for access by members.
Yeah.
Okay.
Say it
Imagine
like
that
this.
chat I thought was like-
Can you,
We can't require that.
Repeat
Like,
that.
that is
I'm
a legal
gonna
matter.
give a couple put up on the screen so we can all actually, I feel like that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's,
People listen better.
yeah, so I
Words.
But it's appreciate that honesty. I guess people listen better.
Some people must be better at it, I don't know.
I'm not saying I'm perfect, but.
Well, I would, but this is a whole separate conversation. Okay.
Great.
Can I move that we shift around the agenda? I got a
One
request.
minute, should we do this one?
What do
Can we finish this thing and then do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Alright. So guys, this is the motion that we're about to vote on. I can make this bigger, sorry.
It's for it's illegible.
Is it?
Is it eligible to?
I feel like I'm seeing some squinting.
Yeah, I can't see it.
You can't see it?
Yeah.
There we go. Just there. Is that
Is that better?
That was a vision bragger, so
All right. So this has been moved by moved by Seneca and seconded by Stephanie. Has everyone had a chance to read it? All right. Does anyone have any questions before we vote? All right. If not, all in favor?
It's a procedural.
Oh yeah, we take your votes now.
No, that doesn't come into effect next term, but it's a procedural matter, so yes, they can.
All right. Perfect. Everyone voted, right? All opposed or abstaining? Perfect. So then it passes unanimously.
I move that this is going to require 2/3 vote. I move that we rearrange the agenda to allow. We have students waiting on the last item on the agenda, and it was put as the last item on the agenda. I'd like us to flip the items so that the fun motion about the goose, and it's not serious, is the very last item on our agenda and for the last council meeting, as opposed to making everybody wait around. So is that amicable by you guys? Yeah. All right. So I move that we flip the last two agenda items, please.
All right. Okay, we need a second. All right, Rebecca seconds it. So all in favor? Perfect. All.
This is procedural. We can vote on this one.
So all opposed or abstaining? All right, so we're good. So that means that our next agenda item is now be it resolved that council approves the creation of an equity student-run service looking to meet the unmet needs of racialized students and address racism on campus. There was a new draft of the proposal sent out this morning for those of you who did not see that email. I think you all should have it.
There's another new draft of the proposal on top of that.
Yes. The last one. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, another draft I can send out right now. That is same for content, but there is some like changes for grammar and spelling kind of things. So I can send that out right now. But in terms of if anyone would like to discuss the content of it, read that. Yeah. So Atlas.
Wait, no, we need a mover and a second.
Oh. Right. So who would like to move?
Antonio's the actual mover.
Right. And second is Rebecca. All right. Alex.
So I'd like to say first, it's really awesome that people are looking at dealing with this very important issue of racism on campus. I think it's something that certainly needs to be dealt with. And my main issue is how the process of this has gone about to make this happen. Because this is certainly an issue that we need to have a comprehensive solution for. When this was first brought up to council, there wasn't a full proposal ready. No one was really sure what they were voting on. But then when this went to the GM to vote for the fee increase, there was no comprehensive solution available for all the students who were deciding how they were going to vote. That passed, or the fee passed, and now we just received the full comprehensive proposal this past week, which the student body at large didn't have the chance to see while voting on at the GM. Furthermore, this whole process has been a little rushed. I'm glad there is a solution out there, but we aren't sure if the service is the best way to deal with this problem. There hasn't been a lot of consultation with students, especially international students, outside of a couple of student groups and clubs that have been consulted. So I think the best way to move forward with this is to stay on track for a winter 2019 implementation deadline, but take a bit longer to consult with students and determine whether or not what is up there, what's been proposed, is the exact solution to deal with the issue of racism. Because there are a couple small issues, for example, mandatory training for faculty and staff, which I know Antonio didn't want that to be in there, he told me.
We didn't say it was mandatory.
In
yeah, good call.
Yeah, in education and advocacy, you'd be advocating for the university for sensitivity training for administrators, faculty, staff, and students. After doing a bit of research, I discovered that having that as mandatory actually decreased levels of diversity and equity in different corporations over the past 30 years. I sent those 2 studies to Elizabeth if anyone would like to see those. But I do think we need to clear some things up like that. I think there's a couple other things that need to be touched up on a bit. So I think we need more time to flesh out this proposal, which is why I'll be emailing a motion to Elizabeth to further consult with students and to look into this proposal, because we owe it to our students to have a fully comprehensive proposal to deal with this important issue. It's not fair to them if we bring up a rush service that we aren't able to consult with all the students and look into this issue as clearly as we should. So I think we do need a little bit more time to take a look at this. And I am emailing a motion to Elizabeth right now to do so, which I'll present to you.
Can I respond to that?
Wait, point of information. There's going to be a lot of debate on this one. It's probably going to be close in discussion. Can we please enforce the 2-minute time limit?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't start the timer because I was sending out this, but yes, I will.
And a quick point of information regarding the GM. The GM fee increase approval was strictly to increase fees contingent on council's decision on the proposal. It is not, the GM was never supposed to consider the proposal of the service period. I mean, students at large are on CLAC, which is the oversight committee for all of our services, and recommends the service creation, deletion, etc. And that would have never gone to the GM period. That consultation process, I will also say, did occur. It didn't occur through CLAC in the same standard, but as others have done in the past, but there was certainly an extensive consultation process. I mean, after I read the Vice News article and the UW Imprint article, I reached out to UW Base about their concerns and met with them regarding IAC issues and how clubs are managed. I talked to Joe and Antonio about that in the past and forwarded along those complaints and put people in touch with Antonio and Joe. And they've done a lot of the footwork and legwork on this in terms of trying to make something like this happen and seeing how it would happen. So to the best of my knowledge, there has been a pretty extensive consultation process. I would also encourage you to download, once Elizabeth sends it out, the version 3 of the proposal, which includes grammatical edits and also clears up the Campus Life Advisory Committee's role in this, which I'll touch on later beyond a point of inquiry.
All right. Okay. So, sorry. Just before entering the response, just to clarify, we're doing where each person gets to speak for 2 minutes at a time. You get to speak twice on a particular issue. These can be amended. If you ask a question to someone else, their response to your question is part of your speaking time. Just so everyone knows before I start, I'm going to be setting a 2-minute timer. Hopefully it'll be when it's done. I'm not actually sure how this works. I'm going to use it. All right. So, Antonio, go for it.
So, Jill and I have been working literally since the February 11th meeting on this proposal, and we wanted to balance both having a well-researched proposal and having a consultation process that that reflects the needs of students that this mission, the mission and vision of this service is trying to address. So I wanted to start off with that. We were trying to balance both things. Can there always be more consultation? Absolutely, there can be more consultation done. But we had to balance that consultation process, which I think we opened it up to as many groups as possible, and we got good feedback through that consultation process from February 11th to since we when we sent out the first draft of the proposal on Monday. There's been really good consultation process. I believe in the research that this proposal is grounded on. We used a couple of best practice research documents from the post-secondary sector and also the provincial government to inform what some of those objective pillars would be for the service. So I think in terms of the service's mission and vision and the objective pillars of the service, it already has a really good higher level foundation for the service to then go into the next phase, which would be the implementation plan. Now, through the implementation plan, once Jill, myself, and our successors come together and do that implementation plan, there's going to be more opportunities for consultation from council, from CLAC, and from other student groups that we may have missed through the proposal phase, proposal creation phase. So I would like to hear more of your commentary from like the higher level of why you think the objective pillars and the vision and mission aren't necessarily a good solution. in order to address this, especially after we've acknowledged that, you know, both student clubs and ourselves have been trying to deal with this issue for years at the university level, but because of certain reasons, the university is not willing and able to meet the needs of marginalized marginalized students. So that's what I would like to hear that higher level.
Is it a response?
It's to open it to.
Okay, Harsh is next, and then.
Okay, so this whole time voting has turned out to be quite controversial, but I've talked to many students, and many of them don't even know what this service is supposed to do, and they don't even know why it's being proposed, and they don't even know what the term racialized is supposed to entail in this operation. So I guess this does highlight a significant lack of awareness among the members, and also that the details surrounding why.
Point of personal privilege, we can't really hear them at all.
Okay.
Can you speak up?
Yeah.
Okay, so and the details surrounding why fee is needed, and what the service will do, and how it will differ from the university's own services on the matter of need for funding. So considering that approval will entail a considerable cost to the organization to be funded by a conditionally approved fee, I motion that we refer this directly to the students themselves by referendum.
Sorry. Okay. Seneca, and you're yielding your time?
I'm yielding all but like 10 seconds.
Okay.
We have a motion on the table.
Sorry. Okay.
I have the motion to refer this to referendum.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I move to rule that out of order. And it's the sole prerogative, and I'll speak in favor of ruling out of order. It's the sole prerogative of council to determine services. Referenda cannot determine services. If a referenda were to say yes or no to the creation of a service, it would be considered a recommendation to this body.
Sorry, Seneca.
This body has ultimate decision-making authority on that.
Okay, trying to figure out the order of events is here because we have a motion with no second right now. So that's the point of order.
To wait.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have a second. Now I'm motioning to rule out of order as the most destructive motion. To rule out of order is the motion to refer. And Antonio is seconding my motion to rule it out of order.
You don't need a second.
But we do need a vote?
No, well, someone's allowed to
No,
speak
you
in
need the
favor.
speaker.
You need someone to speak in favor of the motion, and you need someone to, if they want to, speak opposed to the rule out of order motion. So I'll speak in favor of the motion to rule out of order. This body has the sole deliberative ability to decide what services are, decide whether or not services should exist, recommend services to be removed and be passed off to the university. A referendum would solely be a guiding step that says, do students really want this or do they not, which might bear some value, but the consultation process, I think, has achieved the value that would serve, and I think Alex's original motion actually would solve that better than referring directly to a referendum, because in the referral to a referendum, we run the risk of delaying this with procedural process long enough that it doesn't actually help anybody. And if the purpose of the service is to help people, which I don't think anybody here is going to argue isn't the point of the service, then it isn't about justification of need, it is how do we do this right. There has been evidence for need. Now the problem is how do we effectively implement? And that's a much different question.
All right, so you're speaking, sorry, for?
I'm speaking for ruling Harsh's motion out of order.
All right, so we need someone to speak against. Harsh?
Yeah, so I think the whole fact that many students are not actually aware of this motion in general, they don't even know what this service is supposed to do. The referendum would be beneficial as it would allow for a campaign to yes, vote reform to actually make students aware of it. And as of right now, if council votes today, students will have no opportunity to actually raise their own voices. And referendums typically do have higher turnouts in general meetings and elections in general, so I feel it's imperative that we do have a referendum, at least to determine if students do want this service to occur.
Just a point of information, counselors are explicitly empowered to represent their constituents. That's the whole point of representative government.
Yes, but I think everyone can agree here that many of us weren't actually elected.
Harsh, just because you haven't shown up to any meetings the entire term does not mean that we are not representatives. I was elected by more than 600 votes, and I do represent the science students, as do my other science counselors, individually. So, sorry for the cross debate, Madam Speaker.
you can get more opinions on this, but the decision is ultimately the speaker's.
All right. So I think, yeah, okay. I don't think we actually need to hear that much more on this. I get to rule on this, and I'm going to say that we do not put this to referendum, or I'm going to say we do rule this out of order, so we're not going to put it to referendum. With that said, I guess we're back to the discussion about the motion itself. I feel like there was someone who was next actually to talk, and I don't think.
I think it was me.
Was it? All right. Okay, sorry, you were going to yield your time to someone for all but 5 or 10 seconds.
Yep.
Okay. So whoever it is, I'm going to start the timer.
I'm going to do my 5 or 10 seconds and then I'll yield my time.
Okay.
So I will, to address, and I think this targets both Alex's and Harsh's concerns here, was the Campus Life Advisory Committee oversees our services. And I expressly put into this proposal, after it was sent to CLAC by Jill and Antonio, I expressly included a clause that says the Campus Life Advisory Committee, with the guidance of the VP Internal, will oversee the implementation of the new student-run service, including but not limited to the development of metrics of success and an outline of the deliverables the service shall be assigned. Any such decisions by the committee shall be made in consultation with Campus Life team and the service coordinators. The VP Internal will report monthly in conjunction with CLAC to Council on the progress of the service's implementation. So there will be implementation oversight the entire way. It's not like Jill is going to go off into a corner, come up with a service, and plop it out there, and everyone's going to get to use it. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this right so that it actually benefits people, and the way to do that's with CLAC. I'll be yielding the remainder of my time to anybody in the gallery who wishes to speak.
All right.
Alyssa?
Okay.
So I just wanted to first of all thank you all for allowing us to be a part of the consultation. Thank you, Council, for listening to us. Thank you, Tony and Jill, for allowing us to participate in the consultation process of this whole proposal. We were consulted throughout the time. A lot of the things that were mentioned in the proposal were ideas that we came up with in consultation with our other sister clubs and other groups on campus. We want to say that we had hundreds of votes and attendees at the AGM, which goes to show that the students who wanted to know about this knew about this and they showed up to speak about this. So we cannot, it's not a problem. The students didn't care to find out about this. It was outlined, it didn't clear, the proposal was up there. The termination lines was defined as well in the proposal. But yeah, that's all I have. Josh to speak.
Okay, there's only 4 seconds. All right, so sorry. You want to yield the time? Yeah. Okay. All right. So go for it.
So I just want to speak briefly. On the DW website, it says that this council's objective is to uphold the goals of the Federation of Students under its charter.
Sorry, just 1 second. Would you mind just speaking up? There are actually people on Skype, like council on Skype.
So the DW website says that the purpose of this council is to uphold the goals of the Federation of Students under its charter. I'll remind everybody here that the Federation of Students Charter says its primary objective is to, quote, promote the welfare and the interests of the students of the University of Waterloo. Now I'm reminding you of this because on March 21st, the student body did make their voices heard. They voted overwhelmingly in favor of this motion, and they didn't do so without knowing what it was entailing. On Alex's point, he says that he wasn't entirely sure, or that the student body wasn't entirely sure what it is that they were voting for. But I'd say that that's not true, because the majority of the students who were there and who voted in favor of this knew exactly what it is that they wanted. I did not see even 10 people vote against this motion. It was overwhelmingly in favor, and what they were voting in favor of was something that they knew needed to happen at this university. They saw that there's racism taking place, people being marginalized, and they wanted to do something about it. So when they voted in favor, sure, it was just in favor of the fee increase, but I'd argue that there was an implicit referendum about the program itself. People didn't vote in favor of the fee increase without knowing what the fee increase was for. They voted in favor of the fee increase because they knew that the fee increase was going to go to a service which was needed. So I would say that the responsibility on you guys now is to echo the vote of the student body, which took place on March 21st. And as a result, I would urge everybody to pass this motion.
Okay. There's 30 seconds left if someone else wants to take over. Okay.
Yeah, as a queer student on campus, I would just like to highlight how impactful having a service is. I know for me and a lot of other queer and trans students on campus, having a service that's able to advocate for you is incredibly important and impactful. One of the things we have is feedback forms and stuff that if something goes on in your class, you have a way to report it. And that is just one example of something that a service can do.
Okay, so Rebecca, you're gonna go to your 10? All right. What's the last like?
Oh, can I just like say like
yes.
a bit more? Yeah, it's also really helpful because being a service instead of a club gives you access to a lot of higher up people in the university. As a club, you're only able to get so far, and it's a lot harder to get meetings with the proper people. As a service, you have almost direct access to people higher up in the university and to get your voice heard. Having a service not only gets you money where you can actually have events, but that you can do more promotion and have advocacy campaigns, and you can get stuff out to more than just students that come out to your weekly meetings. And by having a space on campus, it creates a way larger sense of community within your group. GLOW's had an incredible impact on me, and we've been around for almost 50 years, and it's really shocking to me that we're just getting ritualized service right now. This should have happened years ago, and I really think that everyone should vote in favor of that.
So there's about a minute left of this particular speaking time. Would you like to go?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank Seneca for being engaged with the Reddit community, inviting us to attend this consultation. Now, I'm not very aware of like the amount of racism that happens at school, and I'm not very informed. But I personally, as a student, would very much appreciate a referendum, at the very least, to encourage discussion and to acknowledge more of the problem. So I would really appreciate a referendum. Thank you.
All right. So, okay. I think Nick has been trying to go for a while. And we have Harsh, and then Katie. Yeah.
As an arts counselor, and just as a person, I wholeheartedly support this motion. I think it's a long time coming, and I'm sorry that it wasn't here sooner, frankly. And I appreciate all the work everyone's done on it, Antonio, Jill. I appreciate all of you for coming out. So this is a step in the right direction in terms of student engagement. The fact that we're debating this is really frustrating for me. Like, I don't even know why this is a debate. Can I please call the question?
No, point of order.
Yeah.
Just to address why we're debating it, don't please withdraw your request to call the question. I'd say that because we are not debating whether or not there should be a service. Just to be clear, we already approved in principle that there is justifiable need for a service. What we're doing right now, we've approved that there should be a service in principle. What we're doing right now is no longer approving in principle. We are approving an action plan that will be implemented and overseen. So we're saying, how do we create this service? Very different question. We need to be able to have a debate on how to effectively create a service. If you call the question on this, I will vote against it, even though I support the service. Please do not call the question.
Okay, I withdraw it, but okay, so I withdraw my motion, but if anyone wants me speaking time,
So, okay, perfect. So you yield the rest of your speaking time. It's 45 seconds. Who would like? Yeah.
Okay. I just think as an international student who pays a lot of money, this service is much needed, and the fact that we are the only university in the area that does not have one says a lot. And considering the fact that KW is one of a hate crime, one of the highest, has the highest rates for hate crimes, says a lot. So I think the service will also increase admissions for international students because the service will allow them to have their voices heard and give them representation.
All right, perfect. So I said Harsh and Katie. All right.
The motion I sent earlier, has that been read so that could be voted on?
No, sorry, it has not been read. There's a lot going on.
You have to separately move the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to move.
We have to finish this first.
Okay.
Okay, so Harsh.
So, just before information, if this service does pass, will students have to opt out of the
No, because it's part of the Fed's fee, so the same as all of the other services that students pay for, it would operate exactly the same way. GLOW, the Women's Center, ICSN.
Proposal to allow students to actually opt out of it. They do not approve of the racialized student service.
Technically you can, but there might be something worth discussing. That you can't rule the discussion at board. You can rule the amendment at board. but point of personal privilege.
Sure.
Just from the perspective of CLAC, the Campus Life Advisory Committee that oversees services, in terms of how services are administered, paid for, and governed, it goes through a standard fee. You can't opt out of the Fed's fee. However, there's opt-out for a handful of things that Federation of Students administers, and that's guiding principles behind the Federation of Students policies in this regard. If you're interested and would be amenable to the idea, we could include in this, not in the proposal, but in the motion to approve the proposal, an amendment that says tasks the Budget Committee and the Executive Board with exploring the potential for opt-out of portions of the Fed's fee period, like opt-out of a services portion, as opposed to opting out of the specific service. But we cannot do that as of now because it's strictly against the current governing structure we have set up. Just for informational sake.
Yeah, like if you make that, just as a fun information, if you make that motion and it passes, nothing will happen because there's no current way of actually doing that, and board would have to like figure out the system to like break the budget up into, like the budget just isn't organized in that way.
Yeah. It would be possible for the individual service itself to be going to be much like different for other additional services.
Because like the way that the services are structured is part of like a holistic Fed's budget. So there's no way to break down like how much of a fee goes to each service. Like fees are not the only source of income for Feds. That's something that could be investigated in the future, but there's no like current framework for doing that.
So Katie, you're next.
So this goes back to something I had like a while ago in this conversation, but there are ways of spreading awareness without reducing this to a referendum. And if you still want to talk, I'll yield the rest of my speaking time.
Yeah, just to address the point of why that whole the ability to opt out of something, like that opens the door to many other things. Like as a student, there are many other services that I pay for that I directly don't use firsthand. So once you open that door to so many other things that, hey, I don't like this doesn't apply to me, why am I paying for it? It's that it goes against the whole principle of us as a collective student body paying for services that help each other. So just understanding how opening that box is not just going to make everything good.
Yeah, there's still a minute 20 left. Whichever order you guys.
Just off point, because a lot of us are talking about trying to pass the need of the service, and again, like Sandra mentioned, like we already kind of have a general sense of that. So can we spend more of the time of each of the members who are giving us time to speak, or yourselves to speak, to actually talk about concrete steps on what that's going to look like? Because now we're just kind of spending a long time not addressing any of those things. But those are all very important comments. I still want to waste everybody's time because there's limited time to speak about it.
There's 50 seconds left. If so, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point about opting out of the fee. Like you said, it defeats the purpose of creating an all-inclusive campus. And once again, as international students, where a lot of us are racialized minorities, this service is much needed. And we're already paying a lot of money to this university. Why can't we add 20 cents for a service that we should have, that should already exist?
Rebecca.
Speaking specifically on the updated motion, on the updated proposal that you sent out, I just want to add that I really like the paragraph that adds that CLAC oversees this. I feel like that is an additional layer of accountability that does flesh out this motion a lot more than our previous meeting. I know at our previous meeting we did talk about the concerns of, we all agreed with it in principle, but how is it going to be carried out? And I feel like that addendum is super important just for that purpose, looking at there's going to be an oversight on it. It's not just going to, as I think it was Seneca who said, just hand it to Jill, it's just going to happen. Like there is going to be oversight that is going to be looked into. I think that's a very structured and a very formatted way for it to go forward, and I really like the motion as is.
Perfect.
Just to kind of mirror Katie's comment, I think that there is a certain due diligence of students to be aware of things going on campus. Like I do agree that there are certain bodies and institutions on campus that are not very good at, say, keeping students updated and aware, but I do think that the racialized student service was readily accessible to a lot of people. It was set about in the AGM, which all members of Feds have the ability to kind of go there and like voice voiced their opinion, and the people who care about the people who are affected by it, they came out to engage with it. So I don't think that you can kind of sit there and say like, oh, well, I wasn't aware of this, I didn't know, in the same way that you could break a law that's saying that like, oh, I didn't know that law existed is not good justification for that. So I don't think you can kind of say like ignorance is the issue here.
Kind of information. You can also recall any of us if you think that we're not acting in the best interest of the students in our constituencies. So if you particularly don't like the way we vote, or if you don't like, or don't think we're representative harsh, then please, by all means, have a recall election for me, because I just won my election.
All right. Would anyone else like to speak?
Motion?
Sure, actually, just so that you know, Jason Small, one of the counselors on site, has offered to yield his time if anyone in the gallery would like to speak. If anyone would, please raise your hand. All right, in that case, sorry, Jill.
And just to add like another reminder to the implementation stage of it, we also passed at the AGM another $1 to increase the human resource to the services in order for this implementation stage to really be critically looked at from a full-time staff perspective as well, to make sure that there's additional support for the onboarding and the again to get more consultation from students. So we are trying to address this as well in a manner that is holistic, because I just want to repeat this with the next one.
Okay. Okay. So
I'm yielding my time.
Or you guys can take Jason Small's. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just quick. Sorry, I want 10 seconds just to clarify again on the two positions on what us passing this motion today and kind of again what it states, and then what the alternative to that if we don't pass it is.
Sure. As a response.
I can provide some insight on that. I'm sure Jill can speak to it after me as well. So the proposal, the motion on the table is to approve the service beyond in principle, approve the service with the proposed implementation plan that was sent out at the council, well, not with the council agenda, the most recent one Elizabeth just sent out to us, which includes some of the clauses regarding CLAC oversight and administration in the implementation phase.
Also the higher level proposal. Yes, and the higher level proposal as an in principle idea on top of the implementation plan. It would then pass off, if it were to pass, it would pass off to the Campus Life Advisory Committee and Jill, who would together work on on actualizing everything that's in here and making sure that we hire service coordinators to run the service. Usually services have 2 service coordinators. And then we would look into what the service, how we would actually build the service to hit the pillars that we've outlined here, the service goals that we've outlined. And then from there, that would pass off to Jill's, or to the services manager under Jill once CLAC gives the final thumbs up and says, you know, as it's structured now, this is good. Knowing all along, by the way, bearing in mind that we want a winter 2019 start date, then CLAC would give a final thumbs up, and then it would pass up to the services manager who oversees the coordinators, and the coordinators are let loose to run the service per council oversight.
Okay. All right.
Oh, sorry, if it fails, then it also gets redirected to CLAC to make a better proposal and comes back to council later, unless council expressly votes to not bring the proposal back in the future. So if it does fail, this committee, or this council will be brought back to committee for fleshing out.
Yeah, Alex, next.
Yeah, so can I speak before I propose a motion?
You ideally should propose the motion, get a second, and then speak to it.
Okay. I'd like to propose the motion that I just emailed to you.
Okay, sorry, give me a second to pull it up, and I'll put it up on the screen as well for everyone.
Okay.
If anyone would like to talk in the meantime, we actually have another counselor who's also donated his time online, so just raise your hands.
I'd like to speak on the first point, I don't know your name, but you spoke on the concept of the Reddit community as well. And I think that one of the main things is that even though I was on there was no information, there were not many people asking and like actively seeking out that information in terms of trying to like come to that. And I remember addressing even the post, and I remember the very post I was talking about, there's a service increase. So around the university, like UW, when any time you bring the word service like fee increase, there's always a negative associated with it. And the fact that even though that still happened and the vote still passed, that should give you enough reason to understand that even that still did not entice people to come out and vote against it. Like, you should already know the history that we have as a student body in terms of referendums and trying to reduce fees and getting our dollar and our cents back for everything that we want. So that should speak volumes as to the severity of this thought.
Thank you.
Yes. No, we have a motion.
Oh.
We have a motion.
So technically that comment came before the motion was created, just for
Yeah, sorry.
minutes purposes?
Okay. So this is the motion that Alex is bringing forward. Yeah, we need a second. Yes. Yes, and then yeah, take a moment to read it, sorry.
Just for clarification, Katie and I have right to vote on this, I guess.
You guys will make sure to vote procedural. This is not procedural. This is
They can second the motion though, because that's a procedural action.
Okay, cool.
You can second anything, you can't, or move anything, you can't vote for it.
Yeah, they can.
Okay. Has anyone not finished reading? Oh, sorry.
So can you? No. Undo that.
Seneca, they can vote through society president.
That doesn't come into effect until the next council session. We made that decision at the last meeting.
I thought we
meetings.
reversed that decision.
I thought, yeah, that's what I thought.
No, we didn't allow the president of sidewalk to vote last time.
Yeah, but that was on like an error of interpretation, and then we reversed. We're like, from now on, we're going to have society presidents vote.
As far as I'm aware, we were told that I'll pull up the live stream check, but that at that meeting we were told the board had rules
There's
of
an email
implementation.
thread. You should look at the email thread. I don't know if we were just the ones included in it, but
Yeah, I have such a clear memory of the other way. But then I wasn't
Because
sure.
at council, we prohibited somebody who had voting rights.
I think that was more than one meeting ago. I don't think that was for here. That was January.
For the purpose of this, we've been doing that until now. I'm sorry that the society president's here, but it is a little bit disingenuous to start doing so just now for a motion just because it's contentious. I mean, I'm on the side of the motion, but I still think it's disingenuous.
If that didn't pass until the last meeting, we had no incentive to come without a voting seat. So don't you think that now that we are available, regardless of whether there's a contentious motion, there's a reason to have us here?
And you guys have technically had seats on here the entire time. Just
Not
haven't
voting is the major point.
Sorry, Stephanie.
Can I propose to amend part of this?
We don't have a second for the amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need a second to Alexander's amendment.
I'm not gonna second.
Alright, harsh. Alright. Sure. So Antonio's gonna speak against it.
Yeah, so I'm against this motion.
He has the right to speak in favor of it first.
Sorry.
Does this count to my 2 minutes of speaking time? Okay.
It's 2 minutes though.
It's 2 minutes, but it doesn't count to my one session of 2 minutes speaking time remaining.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so after talking with everybody around here, I think we all agree this is a very important issue that needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be done right. I know a lot of good ideas have brought up, especially one person brought up getting international students more involved, which I think we should focus on a little bit more in this proposal. So what this would do is would keep the winter 2019 implementation deadline, but it would postpone this vote to July 2018, and in that time, CLAC would consult with more students, both with student groups and students at large, particularly international students, and it would reconvene on, is this the best solution, and then it would either make some amendments, make some edits, or choose to keep this as it is, move that to council, and we'd have this vote again in July 2018 with hopefully a more refined and detailed policy, because we owe it to our students to have a fully comprehensive anti-racism proposal.
Okay, sorry, Antonio, you want to speak next?
Yeah. So I'm going to speak against this motion just because I believe in the process that we undertook with actually creating the proposal, and as I said, balancing well-informed research in literature and consulting students with lived experience. Again, I don't know what the threshold for consultation is. I find it, I'll be frank, kind of unfair to folks who have been working on this and folks who have been advocating for this to have a higher threshold in terms of student consultation than previous services. So I don't really understand where that threshold is in your mind with this motion. So I'm going to speak against it, and I'd encourage council to vote against it.
Okay. Do you have speaking time left?
All my other things have been points of order.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. You don't need one, at least one. You did speak for one. All right. Okay. So Seneca, and then Lauren, and then Stephanie. Okay. And then Jill. And then we can have donated time.
Before I begin my point, just a quick point of inquiry to the speaker. Is this debate is restricted now to the motion in front of us?
We are just talking about this amendment right now, right?
Okay, so, we're restricted to discuss the motion. Yeah.
Please, yeah.
In terms of the motion, then, I don't see structurally much difference from what we're currently doing. I think the whereas clauses are a little bit disingenuous, but I don't see much structural difference from the way this would happen if the proposal with other amendments were approved, period, because this is already what CLAC has to do. CLAC's mission is to consult, CLAC is required to consult students during the implementation process, so I think that addresses a little bit of this. This seems to just be having CLAC do the exact same things, spend all this time implementing something that then will come back to council at the end of the day for a quick thumbs up or thumbs down, and if it's thumbs down, we wasted half a year of resources and time solving a problem that we didn't want to solve anyways. So if we are intent on passing this motion, I would say that we should vote the proposal down now, rather than delay it a year and vote the proposal down. If we're going to delay it a year, then we should, if we're already implementing in 2019, a year's delay, based on the current proposal, then we should just stick with the current proposal.
Is it a direct response? Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that the winter 2019 is the implementation deadline as is currently in the proposal that we were just discussing. And it's a July that the council would vote on it.
Point of information, I want to know what the timeline on implementation looks like from an operational side, hiring people, the likes.
Yeah.
Okay, so how the timeline's looking right now is, since the fee has just been approved, we are now creating the job description for the full-time staff member as well as working on the coordinators. So we are looking to have coordinators hired and starting like training and research and consultation if you wish, because again, you are allowed to kind of shape this role a bit as council, but we're looking to hire that and start that in spring 2018. So I think, and then I think that's addressing your concerns up here, and then they will also be hired again for fall 2018 to continue that implementation stage, to continue doing some research, to continue doing some consultation, to ensure that implementation for winter 2019 is a success right from the start. And so I think it's addressing your concern of looking at, where is it? It was rushed and few students were consulted. We're not ending that. That's continuing, but it's continuing under the structure of what FEDS certainly already is right now. But pushing it to the end of July, you're snipping away that opportunity for us to be doing our due diligence towards our students.
Okay, sorry. Who were does anyone remember the order for the next people I pointed out? I think you were left next one.
I was just going to yield my time though. So.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, go for it.
I just want to say quickly, I get so as our council members, I see a lot of us actually representing what the majority of the student body has passed, but I also see a lot of us that are very much so against it, and it's very kind of confusing because if this even was passed on towards July, the majority of this conversation, the time that's been allocated, has been discussing literally just trying to justify the service in and of itself, which is completely not have anything to do with the motion itself, which is supposed to be discussing the actual implementation of it. So I think that if you put this off until July, you will literally just be having the exact same situation where we wasted time and we're not actually going to be implementing the service, which makes me think that what's the purpose of that, and I don't see any benefit for anybody.
Okay, there's a minute 20 left, so I think the next.
Point of information, sorry. Just to make sure everyone's aware, the general meeting represents the will of the membership who attend. It does not necessarily represent the will of the student body. So that's just an important distinction. Just because people around this table, and I will argue devil's advocate here in their defense, If they're arguing opposed to it, it is because they believe it is in the best interest of their constituents to be opposed to the proposal as stands. It is not because they personally think it is bad, and it does not contravene the will of the general meeting, because the general meeting does not represent all students per se. The council represents their portion of the population, so if Harsh is opposed to it or Alex is opposed to it, it's because they believe in the best interest of their constituents. It should not be conducted that way, just to be clear.
Alright, so just addressing the point, you said the same thing, that winter 2019 is the agreed upon start time regardless, but it's just more of coming from a reactionary point, like a reactive nature versus a proactive nature. Everything we're doing right now in the mental health scope in this university is of a reactive nature. Things have happened for us to get to that point. We're trying to come here and be proactive. We're trying to give you guys the tools so we don't have to do something after something else has happened. So this is the proactive approach right now. So for you to delay even further, it's just going to push us to a reactionary stance, and then we're all going to keep going back and forth based on like what's already happening in the mental health scope, as similar to what's going to be happening in the racism scope.
All right, there is 34 seconds left. If you'd like to.
I just want to note that also, if we postpone this to July, most of the students will be gone. Summer term is the term that we students are here, so I feel that that would be very pointless. And if FEDS is really built to satisfy the need of students, I think that students should have a say. So that's what I'm against.
Okay. Point of information in regards to that. The amendment over here is kind of proposing that the decision be postponed to council, and council is required to show up and actually participate in meetings, so it wouldn't be the whole general student body, it would be like this body specifically.
Okay. I don't remember who was next. I think it's was it you?
I think it was Stephanie and then Rebecca.
Stephanie and Rebecca then Kai? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out that the specific whereas the proposal for ratio of student services was rushed and few students were consulted. I have an issue with that because I feel like that does not represent the opinion of everyone in this room or the entire student body. I would like to request that Alex rephrase it. So that is, whereas the proposal for racialized student service was felt to be rushed by part of the student populace or something like that.
That would be friendly amendment.
Okay. Sorry, for a friendly amendment, do we?
No, you don't need a second, you don't need anything, we just change it.
Alright, we just change it.
So
Okay.
how would you want it written? Stephanie, you have to rewrite it for
It'd be the second point.
Yeah.
Sorry, this one?
That the general student body on the best,
Or well, it is the
right,
first
sorry.
point.
Okay,
Yeah.
this one. Okay. How would this read? Right, I can
Just I'm willing to take suggestions.
Was it felt rushed and only supported
by members of the student bodies.
was felt to be rushed by
some members?
By some members.
Yeah.
Sorry. Of the Federation.
Is that, and then I'm getting rid of the rest of the line after that?
Yeah.
Okay. You still have a minute and 30 seconds. Does anyone in the gallery want time? Alright. Anyway, sorry guys, if you can just speak as loud as possible just so the people on. Thank you.
So the point that says that refers to trying to find the best solution to deal with incidents of racism on campus, especially with international students and the students affected by racism. So a lot of us sitting here present are leaders in our communities, and we are maybe raised and the vice president and just others that are part of the executive team. So we feel like we can't speak on behalf of our community, and therefore we are those affected by racism, and we're very curious as to what is the threshold to proving that our experiences and therefore recommendations are valid. And so kind of reverse is basically let us know what exactly is your threshold if you don't think that our recommendations are valid, and you're the ones who are affected by this, therefore in the best position to bring out these recommendations.
sorry, there's 50 seconds or 40 seconds left of Stephanie's yield time. If anyone else would like to, okay, go for it.
So another thing I was wondering is what exact student bodies still need to be consulted in order to create this service, because there are international students that represent BASE, UASA, MSA, all of these constituents, and they're all sitting here today. And so I'm wondering what more needs to be done. Jill and Antonio have done a pretty good job, and also it is council's responsibility to represent your student constituents. And if you vote for this motion, it completely disregards the 200 students that say that a service is the proper solution for tackling racism and xenophobia. And this motion kind of puts into question if the service is the proper method of action.
Well, so sorry, you were next.
Yeah. I just want to say that, so I do not agree with this proposed amendment, and it's simply for the reason that you're keeping the same 2019 deadline, the winter 2019 deadline, but reducing the amount of time that CLAC and just everyone in charge of this service has to actually fully flush out the service for the sole purpose of bringing this back in July and having the same discussion again. That's just what I want to say. I feel like the way it's structured right now in the current motion prior to this amendment very clearly has a timeline involved that Jill did speak to a little earlier that gives enough time, or, well, in my opinion, I think we need more time, but I think this is a significant amount of time that is being laid out here in our original motion, and that gives enough time for service coordinators to be trained, for the service to be fleshed out properly, for us to have that 8-month period to sort of make sure that the service is the best that we can make it, is much more significant in my eyes than having this discussion be moved to July and then only have 6 months or a little less, because we're going to not, there's going to be a chunk of August that's gone in like exams and stuff, a chunk of December that's gone in exams and stuff. And I feel like just 5 or 6 months takes away from 2 additional months of fleshing out the service to the best of its ability.
Okay. I am going to say, Kai, you speak, and then I'm going to say that we vote on the proposed amendment and go back to the original motion.
Yeah.
All right. So, Kai, go for it.
Whether or not I am able to vote on this or not, it sounds like probably not. That's what's
Oh, sorry, actually, point of information, we just said that you are.
Okay,
fantastic.
Okay, sweet, because I was going to say, no matter what, I want to vote against this amendment, because I think these discussions of consultancy, which I recognize has been removed from this motion for this amendment, seem really redundant, because there's been a lot of discussions about whether or not people have been consulting enough, or whether or not people knew about this, or all that stuff. I feel like that's a matter of hearsay or personal opinion. I feel like I know many students, in my personal opinion, do know about this, and actually came out to the Fed's AGM, and people are aware of this, so I feel like those arguments really don't matter, because there are just many people here that I think knew that students are aware of it. And I feel like delaying this process is just doing the inevitable, like everybody said. I think Stephanie and Rebecca both took many of the words out of my 2-minute speech that I was just giving right now. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but again, this consultancy and this notion that we need more and more people to talk about it ad nauseum is really just delaying a process that I think the majority of people that are voting on it aren't going to vote for anyway.
Okay.
Maybe that's assumption on my part, but let's hope with that.
Sure. All right. And so with that, we are going to come to a vote on this amendment. So this is not a vote on the whole motion, it's a vote on this amendment in particular. So all in favor? Oh,
Point of information, it's a procedural matter. Everybody has to vote yes or no. You cannot abstain.
All right. So all in favor? Okay. All opposed? Sorry, Jason, you cannot abstain. Okay, perfect.
Very confused, Jason. Yeah, no, it was terrible.
Does anyone else want their vote noted?
Yeah, I'll need a notable opposition.
Okay.
I'm just going to turn my placard this way.
Yeah, can you do that?
I don't want to
vote noted. Please turn your placard side.
Yeah, Katie.
Okay, and none of them care if their votes are being noted. Okay, cool. So then we are back to the original motion. Alex.
So now that this motion has failed, I'm more than happy to work with everyone on making this motion in front of us the best it can be. I would have preferred to have a little bit more time to flesh it out, but there are a couple of small things that I think we could all agree on would serve the student community better. So first thing is the advocating that anti-racism, anti-oppression, and sensitivity training for administrators, faculty, staff, and students be replaced with exploring methods for anti-racism awareness for administrators, faculty, staff, and students. Because statistically, when corporations implement mandatory training like that, often the result will be in either the same levels of racism or increased levels of racism. I've sent studies about this to Elizabeth, because I think decreasing levels of racism is incredibly important. The next thing is, in the background, this mentions the Ryerson's Student Union Racialized Students Collective. I don't believe that's a good example to be using. I think there's better examples, because at Ryerson in particular, this organization does a lot of political activism. For example, it's opposition to Canada Day, which I don't feel would be accepted by students here at Waterloo. So I think if we just take that out and we focus on the Laurier method as an example, that'd be a lot better. And finally, I'd like the physical space on campus with the drop-in hours for it to be explicitly stated that the service would be available to all students, and we prioritize in hiring multilingual counselors there to help out international students.
Can I, just a point of information for council?
Yes.
So, under those objective pillars, we have some of those examples that you're highlighting. And that is things that will be flushed out through the implementation process. We wanted to give council an idea of what those functions under those 3 objective pillars would be. So, of what that could look like. So there is, through the implementation process, through CLAC and through council, there will be that opportunity to give that type of feedback. So I would try to lift ourselves and look at the proposal at a higher level, and looking at the objective pillars as solutions to try to accomplish the mission and vision of the service.
Okay, point of that comes through service coordinators and the service manager and potentially CLAC. This is really low level, but to echo Antonio, to bring it back up, this is implementation from such a low level that council actually doesn't really have the complete authority, not entirely, but through CLAC, through service manager, through coordinators. These are examples of how it could be done.
Point of information, just so the councilors are aware, council has explicit authority on service operations. That means we can delve into this. I highly dissuade councilors from doing so, and I highly dissuade this body from participating in the operational management of the service beyond committee, and that's why we should be referring this to CLAC for more operational and administrative role with the VP Internal and Services Manager, relevant coordinators. But just to set the record straight, there is operational capacity of this body when it comes to administration of services.
Which is already laid out in the implementation plan at a higher level in the proposal.
Sorry, just really quickly, I have just sent out an email with Alex's references, if anyone cares to see, just so you all know you do have it.
Is there a second for Alex's motion?
Sorry, can you reiterate your motion?
He was just saying, he was commenting
Yeah, I
on
was
the changes of the
I'm about
proposal.
to send that, but I would like to hear a little bit more debate on what people have to think about that before I do.
So he was saying some of the wording changes that he would like to see in the actual proposal. So I don't know what that.
I'll send that right now, and I might send you an updated version.
Are you making a motion or just making a comment?
I am not presenting a motion yet.
Okay. What is yours? You don't have any speaking time.
Yeah, I'm moving that we get rid of the speaking limit for the purposes of this discussion, because it's kind of prudent to have a successful conversation.
Okay, I would like to say that we increase the speaking limit, but don't get rid of it entirely. I think for the sake of timeliness, it is worth having.
5 minutes per counselor, and not additional 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes. So I would already be at 2, right? So I'd have 3 minutes remaining.
Okay. All right. So we need a vote. So yeah, this is, just so we're all clear, so what is happening, what we were voting on, is to increase each counselor's speaking limit to 5 minutes in total. So the time that you've already used is still to be removed from what you, like from the 5 minutes. It's not an additional 5 minutes. Sorry? Yeah, exactly, sorry. So all in favor? Okay. That's it. There's no.
Versus opposition, or?
No, it's.
No, yeah, you just want to speak? Alright.
I think everyone here is pretty much made up their mind. Or are pretty votes against it, deferring the vote or having a referendum. So I would like to call the vote on the question, and also like to get a roll call vote as well.
May I ask you to hold that motion, because I actually have a couple amendments regarding how much oversight I think CLAC should have, and my amendments would be to increase the oversight from CLAC to make sure this is effectively implemented. So I do see deficits in the current proposal, and I would have a hard time voting on it right now. I wouldn't vote no, but I'd likely abstain from it. But I want to vote yes, and that would come with a couple amendments. So if you don't mind holding that for a few more minutes and see how it goes. Thank you. No, you people leave my door.
Okay, sorry. Where are we at on that? I missed again, sorry. Alright.
You should ask Harsh if he wants to withdraw his calling the motion.
Okay, so Harsh, would you like to withdraw it so that we can talk about amendments? Okay.
I'll withdraw it.
Alright, perfect. So in that case, does anyone have, like, would you like to bring your amendments forward right now?
Yeah, I'm writing them right now. That's why I asked it. Like I'm on point 4 of my amendments. I have 4 total amendments so far.
Okay.
It's okay. I'll present them all together as opposed to last time I made a mistake of us on the side.
Just do it.
I'm doing one at a time.
Harsh, if you would like, we can talk about the roll call vote, because that can happen at any time before voting, since he's still preparing his.
It would be nice if we have a roll call vote that's final, so we're on this whole
Okay. Does someone want to second that? So to be clear, a roll call vote is when your name is officially recorded in the minutes and how you voted. Just so everyone.
I'll second that motion.
Make that
Sure, one of the kids will
I just have a question, like, would that roll call will be made public?
Yes.
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 Would anyone like to discuss anything about this before we act?
Vote by discussed by 2/3.
That's by 2/3.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no abstentions on it. Keep that in mind. Also, it wouldn't be the only time it wouldn't go public is if we moved debate into camera or into confidential session, in which case the votes would not be made public except on confidential minutes, which would be sent out to councilors.
Okay. So with all that information, does anyone have anything they would like to say about the idea of a roll call vote? All right, in that case.
Actually, yeah, I have something I will say. Sorry, I'm going to take a break from writing the thing.
Please don't.
Fair. I get the value in this, but I see this as a punitive action for those. Like, I think this is a double-edged sword, and I think it's part of the value of having this body make decisions as opposed to a GM is decisions shouldn't be swayed based off social pressure. You know, if people genuinely feel that this is not a good proposal and that they don't want to vote for it, they shouldn't feel compelled to because they think they might be labeled a racist. They shouldn't be compelled to vote for something based on that. They should be voting based on their conscience and based on what they think is best for their constituents. And that isn't always what constituents think. And while I would be voting yes, I would also like, for instance, that there's a reasonable level of discretion around certain things. And I feel like if a councillor wishes to have a notable vote, they can. And having a roll call vote means on either side, either if you voted no and you get called out for it, or you voted yes and you get called out for it in social spaces or on the internet or whatever, I see that as a risk to persons that I don't think is necessarily fair to counselors. But
I'd also like to note that these minutes are posted publicly on the website and are searchable by Google, just so people are aware.
they're legal documents of the corporation.
Sorry, you keep writing. Nick, you were next.
I was just going to say that. I just think that I know I made a very firm commitment to the constituents in arts that I would be supporting this, regardless of my personal supporting it personally. So I just think that they owe it to their constituents for their vote to be known in case it somehow goes against the vast majority, and if not, then kudos, you represented your constituents very well because that's what they had asked you to do. Every council has a different approach. Some will vote personally, some will vote based on. Well, I'm voting. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah.
Leave it there.
Okay. Alex, were you trying to speak?
No.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything they would like to say? All right. So in that case, I guess we can bring this to a vote. It has to be a 2/3 vote, as Tristan has said. Just before we go into it, I just want, just so everyone knows everything, you are, if we do not do this, you can also choose to have a notable vote, which means, however you vote, it will be, your name will be written down beside it. If you don't, if this does not pass and you do not want a notable vote, it'll just be the number of people who voted yea and nay and abstained. And if this does pass, you cannot abstain. You do have to vote yes or no.
Will our vote on whenever not, okay, the vote that's gonna come up right now,
Yeah.
will our names be recorded for this one?
No.
Okay.
And I don't.
Which one on video?
Yeah. We also are being live streamed.
Yeah.
And that would be turned off if we moved into confidential sessions. Just so people know, I brought that up earlier, so I just wanted to be clear.
Sorry, Jason was just saying keep these roll call votes do allow for abstentions and abstentions. Does anyone know for sure? I don't.
It's a procedural matter. You cannot abstain on a procedural matter.
Okay. Jason, did you hear that?
Yeah, but isn't an amendment a substantive matter? Or okay, fine.
Alright. Cool. Yeah.
Should this pass, would abstentions be allowed on the final policy?
Yeah, so that's what Jason is asking. There's no abstention in this vote, but when we actually get to the main motion, there can be noted roll call abstentions.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's what Jason was asking, right, Jason?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Then
First and foremost, why would you like a roll call vote?
Just have it noted on the record.
Sorry.
Just have it noted on the record. Isn't that kind of implied?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if someone is noted for or against, they'll have a note anyway, but you want everyone to be on the record.
Just figured you were having on the record.
Yeah, kind of to what end, but okay. Alright, so let's have a vote on this. So all in favor of having the roll call vote? Okay. 3, 4,
You don't get
5.
2 votes on council.
This is the meeting.
Yeah, I said he could proxies vote.
Has he left the meeting?
Yeah.
Permanently?
Yeah.
He's not allowed to vote, then there's no proxy in council meetings.
Okay.
Sorry,
There's
procedurally
no
out of
procedure.
order.
There's no-
That's fine, it's not
are you
your fault.
sure?
Yes, there's procedurally out of order, you cannot have a proxy.
Do we say explicitly that you can't?
Or do we just not have procedure about it?
We brought this up when Cameron wanted to do the
Okay.
same.
I think
We
it's
ruled
unclear,
then
so
that you
we-
cannot, and if we're going to stick with rulings we made for this year, then we should.
Okay. All right. So this is voting in favor of the roll call vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we have 2 in favor online. So it's 8 in favor. And then all opposed.
Everybody has a minute.
Yeah. So 1, 2. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So that does not pass.
So back to.
Okay. Sorry, so yeah, so we're back to the main motion now. Seneca, have you finished it?
I'm like almost done, sorry, people have been hurdling me with procedural questions. Gosh, people have been doing procedural things. It irks me, it irks me.
I just wanted to know something for ours is that, like, just specifically looking at the math faculty, and it's just Nick was talking about the distribution of your constituents. They have about 7,000 students in the math faculty, and I'm recording right now, about 3,000 of them are international students. So just looking at the composition of the math faculty and how much they need for a service like this, especially just that helps international students as well, should give you that indication of how submitted like service.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that I'm only really here today because I've gotten a lot of emails and messages that are that have said they.
Oh, I understand. I'm just saying, like, the opposition would always be louder than.
I just walked in, but I think I get in the thing of like what people need this. I know, like, I'm a lady and I've gone to the like women's center and it's super valuable. And there are lots of women and feminine people that can go through their entire like campus life and university life successfully without needing the Glow Center, or like the Women's Center, and like a lot of queer people that don't need the Glow Center. And those services exist like as a support and resource specifically for those people, but more so for those people that are like parts of those groups and that need them. Like if there are international students or like students of color or racialized students or indigenous students that don't need this service, like that's awesome. I hope they live a life where they don't feel like alienated or isolated, or like they want a space where they can just like have a bookshelf where they can read about like African math or like report xenophobia to somebody. But like, so the fact that like people don't need the service, to me, that some people don't need it, isn't a reason to like not have it, because so many people do want it, and those people will utilize that service and benefit a lot from it. And then the people that don't need it can go on and live their lives without needing the service, which is super awesome too. Yeah, like I know like a lot of black people would really like the service, but that's not to say all black people. Like there are obviously black people that would be like, no, I feel fine. I'm really secure in my ethnic and racial identity. I've never been called a slur, and I'm not interested in like connecting with people like me or finding out demographic data. I'm just here to like become a doctor. But there are a lot of people that aren't like that, and for them, the service would be a great place.
Okay, I'm sending to there. I sent my amendment. Sorry that took me a while. Yeah, actually, I got in M&S we have a few black students, and I was specifically told by them that they wanted me to vote against this, and I said I would consider that.
Okay. So something I have not actually received your email yet.
I sent it to officers of council.
Oh, okay.
It's a so yeah, the motion I'm proposing actually I think I said it.
Seneca and then Alex.
So I move that we approve the creation of the service as outlined, as outlined in the service creation and cost benefit proposal, contingent on the following 4 points. 1, that CLAC have oversight through regular reporting of the Vice President Student Life, formerly Vice President Internal, Services Manager, and the relevant coordinators as necessary. And 2, operational oversight of the implementation of the student-run service by CLAC, including but not limited to the development of metrics of success as, not and, as outlined, and an outline of the deliverables the service shall be assigned. And 3, CLAC developing procedural restrictions on political activism of Federation services. And 4, which I think addresses Alex's point from before, and 4, contingent on the Executive Board securing resource sharing arrangements with the relevant university bodies, including but not limited to the UW Office of Human Rights, Equity, and Inclusion. This is an issue that's important to students. It's an issue that's important to or should be important to the university, and the university should be funding it. Obviously, if there are tight corners and tight budgets and the university is stingy and doesn't think it's worth helping these portion of students, we can come back to council and budget committee can always increase the amounts for that portfolio. That's a later conversation. I think we should structure approval around the presumption that executives will be getting resource sharing arrangements. I think that helps address some of Harsh's concerns too, that this is not a cost that should necessarily be borne by all students. I think now the splitting of costs, the splitting of potential costs with the university helps considerably in this regard.
Can I
Do you direct response?
There has to be a second to my motion before I
I'll
make a
second.
question.
Okay. I'll have to second it.
Yeah, it's just a response. So, so I'll touch on about number 4. I'm fine with the first 2. Just number 3 and number 4. Number 4. So, the way it's worded right now, it's tasking us to force the university to partner with us on this service.
No, you have to secure it in order for the service to actually be funded in winter 2019.
That's forcing the university
It's
to come
forcing
on
you
the
guys
table.
to get them to the table and have the conversation.
But you
Which
can't force a partner.
I can force you to do it though.
You can't, but you can force us as much as you want, but that doesn't mean it's gonna happen. We're not gonna go we're not gonna go to the equity office. Our council wants us. Our council wants you to enter a resource sharing partnership by the winter 2019 term, or it doesn't happen. Like that's not how negotiations happen.
Well, similar language and the similar spirit of the motion was both discussed in council meetings for approval of prior services, and I went back and read through minutes on our page and watched videos from the previous council recordings. So it seems something that's been done in the past. It was a conversation that was structured around mates. Actually, with mates, it went the other way around. We approached the university, said we want to create this service, and then said, will you guys help fund it? And then that was done before the proposal came to council. So I would argue that if we're going to pass a proposal where that doesn't have the same distribution, I would say that we should probably.
But what if the equity office or the portfolio of human rights, equity, and inclusion says right now we're unable to do so? We're putting the creation of the service in contingent with that resource partnership.
Then we come back to council and say, will council fund it for a full year and give us another year to do it? Right? We're like we still. We kind of have an obligation to.
And sorry, like I agree with you that we should have a resource sharing partnership in principle with the equity office and the portfolio of human rights, equity, and inclusion. But you know, like we should have it as, you know, that's something that we're working on a long-term basis. Like and it's stipulated in the proposal that that's our ultimate goal with the service long-term, to have that resource sharing mechanism in place in the long term. I don't see why we're trying to tie that resource sharing arrangement with the creation of this service.
Okay.
I think it's counterintuitive of why we presented the service.
So I believe it is Alex, Nikta, Kai, and then Katie.
I think Seneca's amendments are great. I think these deal with most of the concerns I was having. I also did bring up 3 points that right after I staple motion to be presented. If Seneca is amenable, perhaps we could see if those can be friendly amendments to this. I think this puts a lot of the oversight and a lot of the consultation that my previous motion would have had, but it has it during the implementation phase. So I think this is a great idea to make sure this is done right, because we do have a duty to our students to make sure that this very important policy is done right. I'd like to motion to present my amendments.
I think then to finish what we're doing now, you could offer friendly amendments to Seneca's current amendment.
Would that be amendment as amendment if it's within the same scope?
Yeah, so if you're bringing kind of a parallel thing, like you can't do that, but if you want to add on to Seneca's, you can do that.
I'll take a look at it just a second. Give me just a minute.
Okay,
Sorry,
sure.
writing.
Okay.
To, I think, address Antonio's points.
All right.
Although I do think if the university.
Okay, so next was Nick.
I just want to ask clarification questions. So, what are the intentions behind point number 2? Just, I had a gallery. Remember from the gallery who just wants some clarification on that.
Point number 3, flag developing procedural restrictions on political activism. So services are directly overseen by council. Council has policies in place that restrict, and procedures, well, no, I think just policies actually. Policies in place that restrict executives, the Federation of Students in general for the most part, and counselors on behalf of council taking political actions for the organization. We're a non-for-profit organization, which means we're restricted in many capacities on what we're allowed to do with this under the scope of the law, and I think generally speaking, it is wise that services do not take a political stance, but actually, I don't want, for instance, I don't want student money spent on political advocacy. I would rather student money be spent actually helping students. And so you guys have.
Can you define political advocacy when you're using that language? Like what do you?
So you guys have to like raise your hand. It's different, but yeah.
So if I'll continue my point then. So what I mean by political advocacy, and I'm sure others can hit on this too. So part of the reason I say he needs to develop procedural restrictions is that is a fairly loose definition, and that's something that the oversight committees need to look at and like develop a procedure. So the rest of this motion would go into effect, the service would be created, those procedures would come along later after CLACS had time to review them and go through them with the executives and from an operational standpoint.
Okay.
Information?
Sure.
The policy that Seneca mentioned is Fed's policy 41, political nonpartisanship.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so for you guys need a counselor to donate your time, or donate their time. But so we can come back there in a moment. But first we had Kai, and then Katie, and then I think it was Alex again, and then Antonio. And then we can come back to that. Okay, so Kai.
I'm questioning the second point of this amendment, specifically the development of metrics of success and outlining the deliverables. My first question is, do we demand the same things to other student-led services from feds? And the second point is, what is the point of having this?
If I may address that? Yes, so this is a fairly standard language when it comes to services. The problem right now, and one of the reasons, so it's been done in the past where we've used CLAC, it's also had issues in the past. Part of the problem is the procedures governing CLAC right now. The CLAC is the Campus Life Advisory Committee, it's the Oversight Committee. They're very poorly written, and so it lends itself to conflict between the existing procedures on oversight and the services procedure. So the two aren't harmonious, and I want to specifically put in the motion here to outline what we will be, how we will be doing it because of that conflict. And Jill can also speak to the existence of that conflict between CLAC's procedures and services procedures. So that's to try to address that. And we are currently reviewing fixing CLAC procedure, but that's a different story than approving the service.
All right, Kate.
I would like to say that I would prefer the wording of exploring resource sharing arrangements, because I don't believe this motion should pass contingent on the executive being able to do that right away. And secondly, I would also suggest, I'm not motioning anything at this point, that perhaps striking the third point and leaving that as a separate motion for a separate issue and not also making that contingent on today. Because I believe it's important, but I don't think that developing procedural restrictions on political activism should be in the scope of approving this service.
So just to be clear,
I'm not
you're divide the
motioning
question?
anything. I'm just saying that I think that it's not within the scope of today's discussion or this motion for this service.
That's fair. You know, I'm amenable with that. Just strike clause 3. Actually, I'll make clause 3 a second in the vein of the discussion we're having, but as a separate amendment totally.
Okay, so does that mean we bring it back forward in a little bit?
You put it underneath as like a separate be it resolved clause. I'm splitting the question, but it doesn't require a vote because it's my motion.
Okay.
And I'm sending you something on.
And the exploring, are you willing to accept the exploring?
I'm sending you the wording I would like.
Okay.
Just give me a moment, please.
Okay. In the meantime, who was the next person to speak? It goes you, Alex.
Okay. It's me?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. To add to what Seneca was saying about the political activism, I think that's a great idea, and if that amendment is passed, I will be voting for this policy. The reason is because a lot of these racialized student services at other universities, for example, Ryerson, get into very divisive political discussions. For example, the whole Israel-Palestine issue, which if that's something you care about and you want to do something with that as a club, that's fantastic, good for you. That isn't something student services should be getting into. Students deserve to have their money spent by feds on ways that will help them rather than any political agenda of whoever's running any given service. And I think having input from different groups as CLAC makes these restrictions would be very amenable to all the different interests that are here, so they could still fight for issues they care about without getting too involved into politics and without dividing students around partisans.
You can respond. It's also just your turn.
Yes, okay. So the difficult part, and I think why a lot of people around the room are sort of having a reaction to what do you mean by political activism, because issues of equity are inherently political.
That's
right?
fair.
So, like, you can't separate the two. To address your concern about, like, the mission and vision and the objective pillars that are laid out in this proposal are the accountability mechanisms that sort of restrict the service in what scope they get involved in, quote-unquote, political activism. Like, they have a very particular scope, which is dealing with racism and xenophobia in all its forms, right? So that, like, they wouldn't really take a stance on, unless it's like they can provide solidarity to other student-run services that we have. Like, we don't really restrict that, but like, there's already that restriction within the mission and vision of the service. So I would say that.
Okay, what I'm actually going to say is, I think it is about time to vote on these, unless anyone thinks they have something different or new to say. What? Yes.
Two quick things. Yeah, no, absolutely agree. I move that we split the question though, so we do vote on point 1 and then vote on point 2, because I think standalone might be a little bit better, especially since the second point is divisive. I think the first point's a lot less divisive. Antonio, does 3 fix your concerns mentioned before?
Yeah, that's better.
Is that all right with you? Is that language all right with you too, Joe?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so to clarify, Seneca, by the first point you mean like the first chunk of text, and the second one you mean the second chunk of text?
I mean the first be it resolved, and then the second be it resolved.
Okay.
There's only 2 points.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the second one, we shouldn't say CLAC, we should say PPC. CLAC can't develop procedure and enforce this procedure.
This one?
Yeah, just to be clear, sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Jill has one more.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just trying to like get it all straight in my head. But with the second point, I think that should be moved to be the oversight of CLAC entirely of every service and shouldn't be dependent on approving this service. So that second point should be for all services in the Federation of Students and not just this service. So I'm just stuck on having that in this sentence to approve or not.
No, that's fair. That's fairly general, like blanket, and I actually think it would be better served for being all services in general. Can we split that as a third independent, or as a be it resolved clause tied to the first one though, not split from the first one, just a
Be it further resolved?
Be it further resolved, yeah.
Sorry, yes.
I'm not sure that is even in order within the context of the current motion on the deal.
Yeah, that seems separate from this.
Alright, then let's
I
split
think
the
this
question.
should be like a motion that you maybe bring up in new business.
Okay, then leave it on the screen, but we'll save it for new business.
Okay. So we, I guess, need a second for Seneca's motion to split it, right?
No, it's friendly. You don't need any motion.
Okay. All right. So in that case, we can vote.
Can you remind everybody what we're voting on?
Yes. So first on like just the first be it resolved statement at the top. So like that's the point 1 and point 2, and nothing else. So if everyone is all okay with that, all in favor. All right. And all opposed, and then all abstaining. Okay.
Sorry. It's an amendment.
And everyone on
So
there.
that is to amend the original motion of that, so there's no abstentions.
Okay, sorry. And so then the next thing we are going to vote on is also an amendment that is the next be it resolved statement, so this one down here. So all...
No, that should also be separate for new business.
Yeah.
Oh, we're also saying that one from the
So
start.
we're back to the
Because it's
Okay.
not the original, it's not in the purview of this specific service. So if there's any other amendments on this service, they would be in order now.
Okay.
So we're back to the main motion.
So we are back to the main motion. Does anyone have anything new to say about the main motion?
Motion to present the motion that I sent you earlier.
Okay. So okay. So these are all you're suggesting amendments to the the original motion.
To the original motion, yes.
Okay. And so these are the suggested amendments. Yes.
These are amendments to the motion, they're amendments to the proposal, which is acceptable for this body to do. It's just not an amendment for ratification, or for the motion just to create a team.
Okay.
It's to edit line items, and I can edit it if you want in the.
No, it's fine. We'll edit. So the only thing I would say, and again, this is getting really into the weeds of the proposal, the reason why I brought the racialized student collective from Ryerson is because I wanted to show that there is there's examples of student associations actually taking a role in addressing issues of racism and xenophobia on campus. It's not to endorse any particular activity with that service.
Yeah, and this would keep the Laurier example in there. And if there's any other examples that aren't Ryerson, I'd be more than happy to add those as a friendly amendment.
Two things. Does it have a second?
Pardon?
Do the motions have a second so we can debate them?
It's not a motion.
Elizabeth, do the motions have a second so we can debate them?
No, we have not had no, Alex moved it and we have not had a second. Would anyone like a second?
I'll second it so we can debate them.
Alright, so I'm just seconding. We can debate it, because I would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, point 3 I'm okay with. It says it specifically elsewhere in the proposal. It identifies it in all, I'm pretty sure Antonio put it in all bold somewhere in there, that this service is for everyone. But if you want redundancy, I don't mind redundancy. Redundancy is sometimes a good thing when it comes to long documents, I guess.
But it's also implied with everything with the Federation of Students that you pay into, like every club, every service.
Yeah, it goes without saying, but it's redundancy is like I'm not going to stand up here and make an argument about redundancy. I think it's kind of a waste of my time. It's in there elsewhere, so I'm not going to harp on that one. For Ryerson, yeah, Ryerson's collective in terms of Ryerson Student Union in general, in terms of effective governance, I think is a poor example, and I think if we're making reference to Ryerson and how Ryerson operates, I think that should generally be shied away from. I am fine putting this in here because it's literally background information. It's in the background section. It doesn't affect the implementation plan. This is literally just debating minutia of the plan, and this actually has no substantive impact on anything that happens. So if we strike this, I'm fine with it. If we don't strike it, I'm fine with it. If we don't strike it and it solves Alex's concerns a little bit, I'm happy to that if we add a statement in that background section that says we will not model the operations of our service off of those of Ryerson. And I'm happy to say that because Ryerson Student Union and their services do not function particularly well.
Okay, so I think it was Stephanie and then Alex.
I'd like to donate my time to the gallery.
Alright, so gallery, you guys have had some time to donate. Would anyone like to speak? No?
I'd like to speak if no one else would like to speak.
Okay, go for it.
I think it's really important to thank like person in the red shirt, I don't know your name, but you made a really good, Kai made a really good point that, yeah, there shouldn't be things in here that other clubs don't have to go through, especially since I know a lot of people, and when people say political, like there's a difference, because like equity is inherently political, but there's a difference between being like this club supports a political candidate, or we are on this side of like a war, or like a civic movement involving like countries or like cities, versus being like, we're anti-racists, we don't like racist people. Like to me that's something highly political, and I want a club fighting against xenophobia to have like a little sticker that says I hate racists and not get like shut down.
Yeah, I just want to adding on to what you're saying, the distinction between political and partisan is very clear. So look, I know I'm not in no position to operate, but I'd ask Senator if you could amend it yourself, just to move political instead of partisan. Because I don't think political is the issue.
Point of information, just for everyone in the gallery, because we went through a lot of procedural hurdles, and those aren't always clear if you haven't sat on this body for a year and gone through Robert's Rules of Order ad nauseum. We have moved that motion to consideration under new business. So way after this, your service is no longer contingent.
No, I know, I'm aware.
No, sorry, I'm addressing. What's your point? Josh. Addressing Josh's point. The service is no longer contingent on that. That would be later on. I'm totally amenable to adding partisanship instead. And we can talk about that in new business if you want to stick around. Otherwise, your service is not being held to separate standards from other services. And I think I said something to that effect when Kai asked it as well. We're following the same procedure.
And I think I'd also like to add that, again, even when you say like adding redundancies, like all this coded language, like if it's not something you would do for another club, then redundancies are by definition like redundant and not good to have. You can say something once clearly. So if you're going to be adding in all these like coded language things to like make it more digestible for other people, I'd say.
Point of information. I spoke against the second clause. I didn't speak in favor of it. I said specifically that redundancy was a waste of time. If they wanted to add it, whatever, it really doesn't affect the substantive text, but I was not necessarily. The only thing I actually spoke in opposition to was using Ryerson Student Union as an example of good operational capacity of the student union.
I didn't though. Like,
nothing here was ever an attack on that. Like,
yeah,
I think it's actually a decent example.
All right. So Alex, and then Alex.
Yeah. So just to clear some things up. So the first point is just ensuring that we don't have, as we spoke about earlier with the wellness policy, that we don't have mandatory training for anyone, which I think we all agree that's the case, but this is just making that a bit more clear. The second point is just to use, for example, Wilfrid Laurier is a better example of how this should be governed, which comes right after this, rather than Ryerson. And I understand it might not be very substantive, but it would affect the overall tone of the document, and I think that would make it a lot more amenable to people who reach out to me or to Harsh or to other counselors about why they had some concerns. And finally, the last part, if making the service available to all students is redundant, I'm fine with taking that out, although I did want to make sure that international students were mentioned by name in this, and especially ensuring that they have multilingual counselors to give them their support in their native language, and I hope everyone else would agree to that as well.
Two quick questions?
Wait, no, sorry.
No, I'm just like saying it's just like two questions, not like that's.
Okay, well.
The gallery can't have kind of personal.
Yeah.
Do I have a time limit? I yield it.
Yeah. So he can yield his 30 seconds of time to you guys.
I'll yield it.
All right. Okay. Number one, in what capacity are like Indigenous students, since we're Canadian, being involved in this? And yeah, number two, like when you say like international, does that like are you assuming that international people are all like people of color?
To answer that, no, of course that's not the case. And I just use multilingual counselors because many international students come from countries where English isn't their primary language. And does that answer your question? Indigenous? I think Indigenous people might be mentioned somewhere else in this document. If you want me or someone else to present a motion on that, just let us know.
All right. So, yeah.
You can do
well, okay.
Yeah. Just point of information.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So this stuff about the multilingual counselors would be under the advocacy and education pillar of the service. But again, like that's something that can be figured out through the implementation process. The things listed under are examples of what those objectives would look like. Do you get what I'm saying? Like,
if you want to do a friendly amendment to move the last part, if you think that's best, that'd be friendly.
it was just a point of information, like for you, in terms of like this exercise that we're doing right now, and like maybe not doing it.
Okay. So I mean, yeah, I think we can bring this to a close. Are we going to vote on these as amendments, or what would you like to do?
Yes, I'd like to go into voting procedure. Individually, yes.
All right. So
second for each one.
Yeah. I guess we can do them one at a time. So.
Second all of these already.
I will second all of them, so we can actually have a vote on it and move on.
All right. So we're gonna vote on it's the 3 blocks separately, Alex. The 3 blocks. Okay. So we're voting on the 3 blocks of text separately. So first we're gonna vote on that top block of text. So all in favor.
Hold on, sorry.
Yeah.
Point of order. Alex, as the mover, is allowed to speak in favor of it before voting commences.
Okay. Would you like to? Is there further conversation you'd like to have about these?
No, I believe I've spoken about this earlier.
Okay, perfect. So all in favor of the first block of text. All right, so that's 2, and then we also have 2 online.
I'll vote
3. Oh, so that makes 5 in total. Okay, can everyone just raise their hands then? We're reading.
Sorry, I'm still reading it.
Sorry.
Can we please?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. sorry, Alex, the motivation behind this one was what you said in those articles earlier, that it's been shown through psychological and sociological study that these sort of trainings actually have a negative impact.
If they're mandatory, yes.
If they're mandatory.
And that's why we need to explore which methods are best. And, if you read the articles, it's peer-to-peer mentoring.
But the word mandatory is nowhere in our document.
But it's not clear, so that's just clear enough.
Can we, I'm going to submit a counter motion. Can we just include optional in front of the word training?
That'd be friendly.
Would you guys?
Sure. All right. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
So the rest of it's stricken?
Okay.
So does this motion just become
So
council add the word optional?
Yes.
before the word
The motion
training?
becomes council adds the word optional prior to sensitivity, or prior to training.
So here.
Yes.
And sensitivity, optional training.
Actually, advocates
Optional sensitivity.
advocates optional. Sorry, advocates optional. My bad. I can't English.
Advocated. Optional. Okay.
There we go.
Yes.
All right. So that's actually friendly.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So we're no longer going to. Okay. All right. So in that case, we can move on to the next one. Yeah. Right. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. So in that case, we're moving on to this second.
Did we vote on it?
Well, if there's something that's friendly, we don't need to. Yeah.
Optional.
All right. Cool. Okay. So in that case, we are on to the second one. Do we need time to read the second one now? I need to hear yes or no. No. All right. So all in favor of the second block of text? Please raise your placards if you are voting in favor. Okay. So 1, 2, and then we have 2 in favor online and 1 abstain. And then so all opposed? Okay. So can everyone please, if you're voting against
Guys,
it,
this
please.
is a procedural matter. You have to vote yes or no.
Yeah.
You cannot vote abstention.
Okay.
It's you're voting on adding the amendment.
Please just raise your vote. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Perfect. Okay. And so then we are on to this last one. Has everyone had the chance to read it? Okay. If everyone hasn't had the chance to read it, all in favor?
So point of information, this is in the proposal, if we talk about a space that meets the need, like the function of the services, peer-to-peer service delivery. It's already in the proposal. I don't understand what we're doing.
If you want to do a friendly amendment to, if that's the case, I could withdraw that specific one if that is already stated.
Yeah, it's already stated.
I'll withdraw the last one.
Okay. All right. So in that case, we are done this section and we are back to the original motion. Is there anything left to say about this original motion, or are we ready to vote on the original motion? Ready to vote?
Oh, was the second, sorry.
Sorry. Oh, okay. All right. We already have a second. We're good then. All right. So, all in favor
The original motion.
of the original, or of the original?
Can you read
Okay.
it?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's not that motion. It's the motion I amended it to.
Yeah. With the 2 points.
It's the one that was in the Word document.
Sure. Sorry. Okay.
It's minimized. It's minimized.
Cool. So.
Yeah. The result then is 1 and 2. Yeah. Can you highlight it for everybody to see it?
Yes. My computer does not seem to want to highlight very bright right now, but it was this whole.
Yeah, just show everybody.
This is what we were voting on. And I will actually post this, sorry, again, into the. Okay. All right. Yes, exactly. Okay. So, all in favor of this motion? Okay. And all opposed? All right. That is passes.
I'd like to be noted for.
Just a quick clarification, now that it's passed, I didn't want to hang up on this beforehand. I was curious why we only put $1 in the proposal, but we actually raised the fee $1.20. We didn't talk about where we were sending the 20 cents.
What?
In the proposal, I don't know if it was just a typo, but it says $1 instead of, it says $1 approved fee instead of $1.20.
I think it says the $1 for the full-time staff to
Yeah,
help
I'm
like
looking at
do
it.
that, and then the 20 cents was like the increase of the student for like the service as a whole, whereas the $1 was for the full-time staff to help aid the formation
Okay,
service.
makes sense. Thanks.
Cool. Okay, well that brings us to our, the end of this section. So we are on to new business.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. Oh, the goose. I thought.
You can
All right.
actually, if you scroll down, the full motion's in here somewhere.
Yeah, no, I think I actually even have it directly in the agenda. Cool.
Okay, so I will move the motion.
All right, we need a second. All right, we'll have Jennifer second it.
I will speak it to the motion. So yeah, the motion kind of outlines requests over the past year that I've gotten. I thought, first off, I kind of originally drafted as somewhat of a joke, and then, you know, I saw quite a few posts on the Reddit page noting that people wanted a goose as the mascot, and over the past year, I have gotten in total probably in excess of 250 requests that I do this. And I was like, you know what, it's the last meeting of this council before the new council comes in, what the hell? I'll bring a motion for it. So I threw it together. It kind of outlines that, you know, mascots are the embodiment of our collective identity as a student, and students have, over the past years, identified with geese. It was the subject of a Globe and Mail article exactly talking about this problem, exactly talking about this unofficial mascot. So, yeah, I welcome any thoughts on it. Otherwise, I would like to move it.
All right, does anyone have any thoughts on this?
We need a second here.
Oh, sorry.
Jennifer, would you second it?
Oh, yes, I can.
Cool. So, anyone have any thoughts on this? Yes.
Do you not like the name of my committee?
No, that's not that. First off,
I would be a little offended.
No, first off, I just want to have a really strong clarification around the fact that it's a mascot and nothing to do with the branding or identity of vets.
That's correct.
Okay.
We can add that as a clause.
I just want to for professionalism kind of aspect.
Friendly amendment, be it that before, yeah, the last friendly amendment, be it further resolved, any mascots of the Federation of Students shall not be construed as official branding or marketing materials of the Federation, except by choice of the executive board or something like that.
I don't actually have a Word document of the motion.
That's okay. I'm just throwing it to Tristan. Let me know if you've got that.
Okay, so I think it was Stephanie and then Katie.
Be it further resolved.
A final be it further resolved that just says the mascot of the Federation of Students shall not be construed as official marketing or branding of the organization.
All right, so we're gonna. Sure.
Can this be to the president since they are the face of the organization?
Oh, instead of the VP Life? So, did you get my first be it resolved?
Just trying to help my successor out.
Did you get my first be it resolved? The final, the first amendment, friendly amendment question.
And then we figure it out.
No, I was just telling you.
Oh, the one that you said. The mascot of the Federation of Students should not be construed as official branding or marketing of the Federation.
Yes. Okay, so now the be it resolved that says, be it further resolved, council shall create an ad hoc waterfowl mascot committee to be chaired by blank. Replace VP Student Life with the president or a representative thereof. Got you.
Okay, so it's Stephanie, then Katie, then Jason has a thing, and then I'd like to bring it to a vote and we can wrap this up pretty quick. There's no point. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to add to Sonico's point about this entire thing that there seems to be a huge kind of, I guess distinction between the unofficial campus community that exists and the fact that, you know, we want to mean more, you know, that kind of thing. But like all of that, the irony about thank Mr. Deuce, stuff like that forms a sense of community for a lot of Waterloo students, and it's really important. And we feel very disconnect from the university organization as a whole, to the point at which we feel as if it kind of antagonizes us, or it's an enemy to go past, where it's just so separate and doesn't really recognize like what is campus culture here, what does it mean to be a Waterloo student. And I think the Goose is kind of one of those things that the actual university itself has picked up as kind of something that the students are going for since like early 2000s, early 2004, or something like that. So I do think it would be meaningful to kind of connect the unofficial campus community and the official campus community by having, at least going ahead with the mascot thing.
Okay, I find this very entertaining. Would this at all conflict with that weird line that runs around? Because there is an actual mascot that does things.
If you notice the last clause, or the, I guess now second to last clause, says, be it further resolved, council tasks the executive to work with the university to make the Goose the official university mascot. It is an advocacy goal that we set for the executive to lobby the Senate to do. And by that I mean set for Antonio. Or his successor.
So to be clear, yes, we're trying to get rid of the weird line.
Yes.
Okay.
Weird lines on the way out.
Alright, so Jason had a thing. Jason, you want to go?
Yep, so I'm moving an amendment to replace all of the be it resolved clauses with be it resolved the mascot beds for the remainder of this current council year should it be a Goose. The reason I am pushing this is so this way the people on Reddit can have their little moment, and then possibly in the new year we can consider this, considering both harassment by these and also the fact that I imagine Smith hasn't actually consulted these on whether or not they want to be represented in this way.
I'm not going to consult.
I think those are worthwhile goals.
Alright.
I think that we rule that out of Jason's proposal out of, or motion out of order.
I'm literally dying.
What was the proposal? His proposal was to strike all of the clauses and replace them with that for the remainder of this term it shall be Goose.
So something if you're moving out of order, we need a second.
I'll second that.
Alright, Becca seconds it, we need a vote. All in favor? Alright.
Okay,
Well,
so
that's
I call the
unanimous.
question on the original motion.
Yes, good call. Alright.
As amended.
Perfect. Alright, so all in favor?
Wait, can I ask a question before?
Someone needs to yield their time.
Okay.
No. Alright, so that is unanimous. Okay, actually, right. Jason.
Yeah, I just think it's
So Mike.
a lot of questions.
Alright.
Just
So that does bring us to new business. Now, it is 4 p.m. We have been here for 3.5 hours. People are welcome to bring things up in new business, but I would request that you are considerate of how long we've been here.
Also the fact that the 3% left.
Do you want to charge?
Pass it along.
Are we going to have an April meeting?
No. This, we'd be in exams. I mean, so that's not.
We technically have to unless the committee votes against it. Okay, so I will move under new business that we charge the officers of council in coordination with the executive to make decisions on council's behalf that are not non-financial or not creation of service, additional service or anything like that for the remainder of term. So.
Okay. Or we can just cancel. Do you have anything for next meeting?
Like I mean, like what?
If something comes up,
we can't meet during exams. So I think the last day of class is April 4th. So what are we gonna have anything accomplished in between now and 11 days that would be of
9
use?
days.
I think we should just cancel the next meeting.
Yeah. So we don't. That's why we never scheduled
Well, that's
an
right.
April
To
meeting.
move to cancel next meeting, but charge any duties of council during that time to the officers of council.
Or it just gets.
Sure, we'll postpone that.
Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah. Okay. All right.
My thoughts on this was Brian was hoping to push the budget procedure, and I don't know if he forgot to set this agenda or what. But,
It's not gonna work. Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Such to suck, I guess.
Yeah. In summary. Okay, but so are we actually voting to cancel next meeting?
I don't think we need a vote
We don't
because
need a vote?
we never even scheduled the meeting knowing that.
Okay, cool. So in that case, anything else for new business?
We actually had 2 agenda items that got pushed to new business by procedure.
Oh, yes, sorry. So Seneca's,
And Josh, I will be moving to replace political with partisanship. Is that amenable to everyone else in the gallery? So the first one is the very last one on the screen. And replace political activism with partisan activism. You don't need that extra, so it's already there. And that's not.
Elizabeth, there's a question if you need time.
sure, sounds great. All right.
Okay, yeah, so overtime, so that would be something that would be applied to all Fed service. So
Yeah.
okay, yeah, so if the Women's Center wanted to be like, okay.
It's not. We're not making special exceptions. This is we're new business now, which means all the decisions here are fresh. Yeah, stuff that wasn't on the agenda.
Correct. Okay. So does anyone have it? I guess you're moving that, Seneca?
PPC shall develop procedural restrictions. Sorry.
Okay, so but Seneca, so you've moved this. You need a second, yeah? All right, perfect, Katie. Okay, so then discussion. So Seneca, you're suggesting another friendly amendment, which is which?
Oh, just a shall develop procedural restrictions, and then there should be no and at the end.
I put council tasks PPC to develop.
Sure. That works.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns about this motion as it's currently written?
So are we gonna vote on the operational?
No, that's
just this like last line.
Okay, cool.
The operational team.
So that's
Okay. So if no one has anything they'd like to say, we can bring this to a vote. I will copy this into the Skype call so you guys can see it too as well. But all in favor. Perfect. That's everyone. Cool.
Okay, and so then the last one would be replace the number 2 with be it resolved. Operation of the implementation of student services, plural, since it's no longer for a specific service. Including the link to the development of metrics of success, outline of deliverables of the service.
services.
Shall be undertaken. Instead of shall be assigned. And policies and procedure committee shall develop procedures that reflect this.
At the end, or
yes, at the end. And policies and procedures committee and PPC shall develop procedures that reflect this.
shall develop
Procedures that reflect this. No, not producers.
I cannot spell it even a little bit.
No, that's
It's fair. It's been a long
really
time.
nerve-wracking and taking from everyone, so.
Develop absolutely maybe? Okay. And procedures.
Just backwards, which you would partly.
Can you copy that to me?
Yes, I can. Okay.
To reflect this.
Okay. Would anyone like to speak to this? Okay. If no one has anything to say about this, we can bring it to a vote. So all in favor? Cool. That looks unanimous.
I move that we adjourn.
All right.
Who moved and seconded that?
Sentiment Katie.
I've been in long time.
So what happened earlier with that one?
Yeah.
it's almost, I think I was where they were I was
When school feds up to you for nominations. Oh, I didn't get that.
Oh wait, I think it's a record.
You have until
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
How do you turn this off? Did I take a picture?
This one.
Oh, good. I pressed and stop.
Oh, you did it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna close it now. Oh!